All right, good evening, everyone. It's 6:35, time to get started. Calling to order the January 18th, 2023 meeting of the Willington School Building Committee. We'll start off with present to speak. Comments may be limited in time to allow all present to speak. We'll start with the room. We have a few people here. Is anyone who would like to speak for present to speak? Name and address, please, and go for it.
John Blessington, 29 Mason Road. Let's say if I were given my druthers, I would rather see the hall school option chosen. And many other people I've talked to, most of them would also like to see the hall school option chosen. I don't think I've talked to one person other than members of the school building committee who are in favor of building a new building on new property. But apparently the only way a citizen can communicate with the school building committee is through the use of a survey. So a couple of weeks ago, I filled out a survey so members of the committee would know what my choice was and why I felt the way I did. Today, I asked a couple of members of the school building committee what they thought of my remarks, and they haven't seen them. There isn't much purpose in my submitting a survey if it's not going to be seen by the people charged to make the decision. I included remarks in the survey that I filled out. And in order to make sure that people are going to see these remarks, I want to read them now into the minutes of this meeting. To the question if I would support renovating Hall Memorial School via an alteration extension project to like new condition to form a consolidated preschool through grade 8 school, I answered yes. The next question asked what factors I considered when selecting my answer. These are present location, history, likelihood that this option would be much cheaper when taking into account infrastructure and site preparation costs on the new site, plus the repair and restoration costs the town would be morally bound to pay before returning the property to the Hall Foundation. Superintendent Stevens remarked that cost is not counted against the education budget because it would be up to the people of the town if they wanted to pay that cost. I find that rather disingenuous, as the townspeople already voted twice to have the roofs fixed and it was never done. To the question, I would support building one new preschool through grade 8 on a new site, I voted no. I then went on to express the following opinion. I don't believe the school building committee seriously considered more than one option. The first select woman created the committee. She handpicked the members. She included only those who favored the new school option. A chair was appointed, but the first select woman was obviously running the whole show. Also, it appears that she attended and participated in all the site selection meetings. Finally, the committee reported that the best option, nay, the only option, was to build a new school on property to be purchased from the Wyszynski family. I do not believe the school building committee completed its mission. If it was to identify the best alternative to our K-8 situation, there were many options that could have and should have been looked at. The hall school renovation wasn't even looked at until Ralph Toulis finally clawed his way onto the committee. We might also notice that in spite of Superintendent Stevens' boast that the committee looked at 120 sites and the Wyszynski property was the only one that happened to be useful, shouldn't there be a secondary choice? If we purchased the property and then someone found an endangered species on that property, what would we do then? In summation, it appears that this whole operation has been aimed only at selling a particular plot of land to the town. This is the most egregious misuse of town resources that I can imagine. The proper course of action here would be to dismiss the school building committee, void its findings, and appoint a new committee, ensuring that none of them had a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Let's go to online. Is everyone present to speak online?
Jim Marshall.
Jim Marshall.
Hi guys, James Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill Road. Figured I'd bug at the start of the meeting instead of the end of your marathons. So I just wanted to make a nod or give a nod to the work QA&M presented last week. I don't know if they're there tonight, but you know, I appreciate the effort that they put in on the concept plans, given that it was really a tall order in a short time frame with very little opportunity for feedback. You know, I think all options, it was a great proof of concept, but particularly regarding the hall school renovation schemes, it was really a proof of viability that, of concept viability at least, that it was a bit hypothetical prior to seeing that. It also, however, highlighted much more clearly how challenging and impactful a renovation of Hall could potentially be, both to the town, the students using the facility, and the potential costs and unknowns that may come with that project. So I think those are all factors that the school building committee really needs to be very cognizant of moving forward. I would also put this out there just from experience that I caution or make it as plain as can be that any of these schemes are likely, they're just that, conceptual at this phase, and the final resulting product is likely to be something that looks very different from anything explored at this current level. So that these are really, a full design process will entail multiple opportunities for feedback from the community, further evaluation and revision to design, the ability to try to factor in some of the concerns, that residents may have. So, to that end, I think it would also be beneficial if the representatives of QA&M are on the call, that to talk a little bit more about how, some concerns that I've seen presented in the public, such as separation of ages, within the new facility, security, administrative oversight of public areas, just relay that there is going to be the opportunity to address any concerns as this design progresses beyond the proof of concept level. So, but once again, I think it was helpful information to evaluate the two options. So I appreciate the work. So good job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Name and address, please.
Charles Kearns, 248 Town Turnpike in Willington. I'm a lifer here, grew up here. And since the last meeting I attended 2 weeks ago, I've had a chance to research this out a little bit. And with the two main proposals out there, I'm not comfortable with either one. I think it's going to be a big burden to the taxpayers of the town. I think there's other alternatives that really haven't been looked at carefully. Talking to some of the residents, and a lot of them work with me that live in town. They're not fully aware of the options. They haven't really been able to research or hear things out. I think we need to postpone this referendum so more of the residents can be aware of what's going on, and maybe come up with alternative plans. In addition, I do like Mr. Blessington's suggestion that maybe the school building committee be revamped and maybe have more town residents that know the in and out of how things work around here, and maybe expand it. And I think alternative ideas should be not taken off the table, including closing up Center School.
Thank you. Back to online. Nick Tella.
Hey, Nick Taylor, 49 Merrill. I want to state that Mr. Blessington's remarks were pretty spot on. I like what he had to say there. I hope the town eventually, once it gets there, votes no to both options and holds the town accountable and make these two schools do the upgrades. I hope also, I understand that the SBC refuses to allow them to look into that more, but I wish that some people can put pressure.
We lost you, Nick. You're on the gas burn.
I'm on, I don't know. He's still in Michelle.
Nick, are you still there?
Mike, why don't you mute him and go back to him later?
We got it, Rob.
Oh, okay.
We can see things on the screen you can't see.
He's still, he's there. Now he's gone.
Okay, so we'll go to the room for now and we'll come back to Nick. Do we have, yes, sir.
Earl Pearson, 55 Premier Road. I know it would be a logistical adventure to say, best word to say about it, but as far as the revamping of the whole school, phase it in over a period of years, eventually lowering the cost. There's gonna be a time factor there. A lot of people wouldn't be happy with instantaneously here in a new school, but that's one option. Phase it in. Whatever work has to be done on the whole school.
Thank you.
Was that ever considered?
We can't engage in present to speak, but if you look at all the materials, you'll see things like that have been discussed, and we'll discuss it more. We can maybe discuss it in FAQs or somewhere along the way, but in present to speak, we don't go back and forth.
Somebody, Michelle had her hand up, took it down.
Are you all set, Mr. Chris?
I don't know if Michelle still wants to speak. She had her hand up.
Michelle, you had your hand up. You want to speak? Is Nick back? Do we have Nick Tella back?
Nope.
All right, anybody else online present to speak?
Okay.
Okay, anybody else in the room? Okay, let's move on to the next. Chairperson's report. A lot has happened in the last 2 weeks. Public engagement, I want to identify as being what I think one of the most critical things we can do with this. We are doing multiple prongs of public engagement. It addresses a comment that was made also during present to speak. The survey is not the only way to communicate with the committee, as is evidenced by the fact that there are people in this room communicating with the committee. There's also the email, and there are people have also been walking into the town office building and walking into the superintendent's office with information about how they feel about the choices. So there are multiple means to communicate, and that is part of the effort to get good public engagement. Whatever decision is made by the taxpayers, as I think we all know, is going to affect Willington, even if the decision is not to support any of these projects. The decision is going to affect Willington for maybe 50 to 100 years. It's a community decision, and it's a really big deal. So I feel like these are big priorities, and we'll continue through every step of this to do the best we can with community engagement. I would again ask people to be considerate of the fact that there's a ton of inaccurate information being circulated. A lot of it is just simply people innocently not knowing the specifics or hearing something, thinking it's factual, and repeating that information. In other cases, it's blatant misinformation. Regardless, I would ask anybody who's watching this meeting, listening to our meetings, to please avail themselves of the legitimate resources. If you hear something that you think is bad or good and you want to check on it, please use the processes to find out if it's real information, and don't keep passing on secondhand information, because there is a lot of it, especially in social media land. There's been a lot of concern about if the emails to the SBC email address have gotten answered, or if they've gotten just thrown away, or if they're being ignored. After I became chair and got access to that email box, I went back through the entire history of the SBC email box, and absolutely every single email has been read and has been responded to in some fashion. Whether the response was, please check in the FAQs, or thank you for your information, we'll consider it, or an actual answer. Many got answered directly because they were simple questions that just needed a simple answer or a direct answer. As of 3 or 4 days ago, I had PDF'd every single email conversation in the mailbox and shared it with all the committee members, so that all the committee members could see the public's concerns and understand what the email traffic is. There were no emails until today. I have not yet conveyed those. There's been one string of emails today, which is a continuation of a conversation that was already in the stuff that the committee members have seen. So I want to assure the public, if you email in, your email will be seen and it will be addressed in some fashion. Concerns, we've had a lot of discussion over the last, particularly couple of meetings when we've been looking at this very interesting information from QA&M. It's inspired a lot of conversation, a lot of new ideas and questions. And I feel really good about that. I think it's helped me understand what we're doing better and helped me create some new ideas and thoughts. It's also led to a lot of questions, including what we've heard tonight, even in present to speak about things like age separation, security, all this other stuff. And I just want to assure everyone that if you look at how the process has gone so far and you look at the comments, these things will absolutely be addressed in design. We're at conceptual level, so there's only so much we're going to dig into it. We did have some comments at the last meeting from QA&M about the separation of age groups, for example. We did talk some about security. We're not going to talk about all security features. I've been asked in emails also. We're not going to share that because that defeats the purpose of security if you tell everyone how your security works. But I just want to assure people that this process, as it continues, if something is approved and the taxpayers want to go to a project and go to design, we will make sure, and this public input on those design features will need to keep coming because that's when it needs to get plugged into the process. That's it for chairperson's report. Any questions from the committee on any of that? Peter?
Just on the information you're receiving, and I really appreciate you sent us the emails. The surveys, are those all going into a folder somewhere? How do I find that?
We will be, do you want to answer that?
I mean, we're gonna talk about it tonight.
Yeah,
It's coming up?
it is, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we'll address
I
it.
didn't mean to.
Stand by.
I'm standing by. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee members on the chairperson's report? Catherine, it looks like you, oh no, it's the cursor. The cursor is on your screen. It looks like you have your hand up.
Call her anyway.
Okay. Moving on to approval of meeting minutes.
Your communications, is that what you just addressed?
No.
Communications is next,
Oh, sorry,
according to this agenda.
It is this one.
you're right. Do you want to consider moving them up?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, if it's, if there's no objection from the committee members, let's get, let QA&M go now. And, we can deal with meeting minutes after.
Great idea.
All right, then why don't we turn it over to you, gentlemen? Mind yourself.
You're gonna chair?
Yeah. It was.
Yep, be good.
I'm sorry, Mike, what section are you on?
Bumping 7B.
We're at 7B, concept plans.
Oh,
We're
we don't
moving
have
it
to,
up.
we don't have to vote to switch to go down to that?
No, we can move the agenda around by consensus.
All right, thank you.
We got a bunch of nods of yes, I took that as consensus.
Okay, well, good evening again, everybody. Great to be back. So after our presentation last week,
Two very fast weeks ago.
two weeks ago, we went back, we did get quite a few questions in emails, which we have provided both a written response to, as well as try to address those questions in a graphic format in this presentation. The presentation is very similar to what we had before. The only difference is we try to incorporate those items that we could into the documents. So we'll start by the first section because of the comments that were made earlier on about security and age separation, and you're absolutely right. Even though security was one of the parameters and priorities that was established. So this first slide, which is all about project goals, we went through that at the last meeting, and to maintain safety and security, not just during construction, but for the project itself. Every school project has to meet those standards that are set by the state, and those are considered in all these designs, all the concepts that we reduced. We considered those the security parameters. Ultimately, what happens is that the police chief, the building inspector, the entire team works together to develop the final option. And that's obviously not going to be publicized, but there's a lot of input that comes in during the design phase on how to implement those. But things like secure vestibules, cameras, all that is factored into our consideration in these design options. The other, in terms of age separation, in all three options, we considered, as I've mentioned, the pre-K, K1 have to be on the first floor. And so they were in both of the hall school options were on the first floor and in one at the far end of the site. And then the grades 2 through 4 were on the second floor. So those issues have been considered. I don't want to take a lot of time because I know we went through this for like 2 hours plus the last time. So we're just going to, talk about some of the items that were brought up. There were questions. So one of the questions was about the site, the new site, and the grades, the difference in grades and other details about the site. Those were all issues that have been considered. Just for your information, we have drawings that work all that out. There are going to be retaining walls on the site. There is part of the grade is taken up by it slopes, and so the building is cut into the grade. So our civil engineers and landscape architects took that into consideration as we designed the building. So let's see the next slide. Okay. So that was the question about the new school. There was several comments. They were not not questions. For instance, a comment about a new site gives us a blank slate to do pretty much anything we want, and that's true. Anytime you're starting from a clean site, that you have the option of developing all the adjacencies and the best efficiencies, etc., for the design of a school. So that's not to say you can't be efficient in your design of a renovated school, but there's certain limitations based on existing conditions that one has to consider. There's a question about an auditorium again. Whether it's the size of the auditorium, and this is really a committee decision as to whether you provide an auditorium for this project or not, and that's purely an issue that the committee has to decide. You have the cost information. On option 2, let's just go to option 2 on the site once again. There were a number of questions that pertain to retaining walls. That's more detailed than we typically would do at a concept level. But just to assure everybody, we've thought of all those things. So our concepts are not just that, oh, yes, you can fit it in. We actually looked at the grading. We actually looked at a lot more detail on the site, both the existing and the new sites, in developing our options. So those issues have been considered. There are some things that, we can't control. There was discussion about existing lower fields and how we would regrade it. Actually, there was a good comment about leveling it out because we had a ramp shown. We looked at that and we adjusted it to eliminate the ramp. So a lot of good information came to us and certainly helped us in responding to the questions that came, and we tried to address those in our design itself. There was a question about the wetland condition. Again, that's a much deeper level than where we are at this point. So that would be something that you would consider later on. Questions such as, do we have adequate turning radiuses for some of our at the service areas? And yes, we do. And define the size of the vehicle. If there's a larger vehicle that we should consider, then that would be again the next level of discussion. Discussion about whether we lower certain elevations so that there's a smaller retaining wall, and certainly that's something that could be considered. But some of these solutions or these issues would then create another issue. For instance, yes, we lowered, we eliminate or reduce the size of the retaining wall, but then it creates an issue of accessibility because now you've got a tiered site. All of these can be managed, but it's just a matter of, what is the cost implications and how you do that. There were questions about the distance of paved play areas, the adjacencies to where the play areas were. We responded to that. We actually moved some play areas around so that they would be closer to the classrooms. The unfortunate thing about existing buildings is we've got limited site and we have to work with what we have. So when we tried to do that, not saying that these are the best solutions, because these are solutions that were developed over a 2-week period, basically. So that I'm sure that there are umpteen better solutions. I think the point that was to be made was, are these viable options? Are these viable sites? And the answer was yes. That's what we were indicating, that yes, but there are always compromises to any solution in terms, especially when you're dealing with an existing building. So the decision would be, what compromises are you willing to accept in the development of a school? So going to option 3. One question, for instance, that was asked is that the distance from the school itself to the fields, there's a parking lot in between and there's circulation in between. And certainly that's the case. You wouldn't be unique in that manner. And what we would typically do would have sort of an accessible or a route defined, and that allows people to walk through safely. Many times what we do is we have sort of traffic calming tables so that they're like a speed bump, so to speak, but they're flat, they're striped for pedestrian, as a pedestrian walkway. It does 2 things. It gives you access, but it also slows down traffic so people just don't go flying through the parking lot. So these are, one of many different alternatives that could be developed for situations such as that. Let's see. There were some comments about maybe the coordination of where we show what we show on a site plan and what we show on the floor plan, and that certainly, it's more an interpretation issue, but we try to make it more literal, so we adjusted some of those comments to make sure that they're fully coordinated. But the idea on this particular option is that you could literally have the whole back of that school as a loop for buses. There are other points of access beyond what's shown. Ultimately, what we find in these situations is whenever we have a solution, the board and the users of the building tend to decide what works best. You have 2 options. You can flip them back and forth, whether the buses are in one area and the cars are in the other, or vice versa. So it gives you the flexibility in getting those resolutions. There was a comment about, I was showing the outline of the existing gym and locker rooms. Let's see, you can go to the full thing. And I think the point here was what you see is that this red line. Right there, that dashed line sort of indicates the extent of the existing building. We've actually, improved on it to show even more. I was trying not to make it so that the plan then itself begins to get muddied up with so many lines on it. So, but, that was the idea that yes, that's the extent of where the existing building is. There were comments on floor plans about whether additional windows could be added. That's always the intent, the goal here, and that was one of the goals of the project, was to bring natural light to the building, to all instructional spaces. That comes almost normally with the and because a new building, obviously you can design up the windows. The renovations, we had a challenge in a couple of areas, particularly that area that's currently the cafeteria, which is an interior space. And the last presentation, I said, that's where we had band and chorus identified for the purposes of the acoustics and for the fact that you need high volume spaces for those two programs. And so it was appropriate to have them there. The downside is that it's an interior space. All the other educational spaces have natural light. Again, the criteria we used is that's a space that students come into for a short period of time and then leave. That's not a room that they're in for long periods of time. So, and there's other ways of bringing in natural light that could be considered as you develop this project forward. So it's an issue that we need to consider, but there are solutions for those conditions. There was comment about no exterior access to a toilet, and that can certainly be incorporated into the project. That's fairly minor in nature. There was a question about elevators, and I'd like to mention at the last presentation. So there's an existing elevator that takes you in the existing building, but the new portion of the building would have a second elevator. So every space in the building, and especially with the hall renovations option, but the new goes without saying, but for the hall and every space, every level would be made accessible for people with disabilities. And so those are sort of the main concerns. Again, secure, there was a question about whether we would have a secure vestibule at the link on option 3. And what you can see right here is that there's a link between the new addition and the existing building. We've indicated a secure vestibule. If that became a point, generally what happens is there's one major secure entrance, which is your main entrance. And you want that to be secure, especially if parents or anybody's coming to the school. That rear entrance is a pick up and drop off of buses. So it's in a controlled environment. It can still be made secure, and what we've shown is that it can, there can be a secure vestibule there as well. But it's a secondary access point. People will not be coming in and out of that. Only time the kids will be leaving and going to the building is when, and teachers will be out there to be supervised in the ingress and egress of kids. There were some questions about the distance of when you get off the bus to getting to your classes, for instance, an option 3. And the reality is where you're coming into the building is pretty much close to the midpoint. So the pre-K through 4 students would be going to the right. The 5 through 8 students would be going more so to the left. There are elevator and there's stairs pretty close by that those students would be using. But some of the challenges are just by nature, are there by the nature of the site. It's a sloping site, it's a tight site. So these all have to be considered and worked out, and certainly in the options that we presented, we're able to resolve all those issues. And I'm sure there'll be others that people will think of that, in my mind, having done this for over 30 years, specifically for educational facilities, and believe me, I've renovated probably 95% of our work is renovation of those types. So we know the details of what it involves. So that's what we demonstrated. So wasn't planning. So there's a last slide that we did, and I think we sent that out to everybody, because typically when we look at 3 different multiple options, in this case 3 different options, we think of it in terms of how do you consider these 3 different building approaches. And so what we do is we start by taking what your goals are, and we try to develop bullet points for those goals and develop some kind of response to them. And that's not to say that one option is better than the other, or but they're all different aspects of the project that you have to consider. And you have to look at it in a, you know, in an unbiased way, in a way that says, okay, what did the ed spec ask for? How are we going to accomplish it? What are the priorities? And you know, in some cases, it's, you know, how difficult is it going to be to renovate? We all know that if you were to build a new building on a new site, there's going to be no disruption to the existing building because those students are going to be on in a different building on a different site. So that building can be built. But the contrary, and on the other aspect of it, then the question, and we have that on this, you know, and what do you do with the existing buildings? Those are real questions that are asked all the time in communities all over Connecticut. So those are issues. You know, what is the level of disruption to education? Everybody knows that if you're going to build something and right next to where there's teaching and learning going on, there's going to be disruption. There's going to be noise. There's going to be, you know, sometimes, much as we like to say that if things are perfect, there might be some issues related to construction. You have to be careful about security. So these are all things that need to be considered in the comparison of the options, and that's what we've attempted to do here. There's also the fact of time. How much time will it take to do one project versus the other? And ultimately, you know, things like if you're going to add an auditorium to a smaller site, it's going to be more difficult. To a large site, which is brand new, there won't be an issue. So these are just basic facts, and we've tried to put those out there. There's some cost information, I believe, that was developed by Colliers, and you know, that information is in there. But it just gives you a quick overview of comparison, and things, you know, it can be looked at in a single slide to say, okay, you know, here's what we're dealing with, and what's the pros and cons.
Just for the people in the audience, the slide he's showing on the screen is the same as that board, the presentation board over there. That got to me yesterday afternoon by email, and in the flurry of emails, I intended to forward it to the committee. I did not do that till this afternoon, so they probably haven't seen it yet. But it is in your email, but it's just this slide to add on the end of the presentation for that board, same thing. So you'll have it when you check your email. Any questions from board members for these? Ralph?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ralph Tullis. Looking at the parking, and the reason was that several months ago, I asked Mr. Stevens what he felt was needed for parking spaces, and his response was 100 spaces. The other day, I did a count at both schools to see how many cars were using those lots, and found that we had 88 cars between the two parking lots. How much parking is anticipated for parents, and why do these concept plans bring us to 131 spaces? I'd love to know how we go from 100 to 131 when we're only utilizing 88 now, and we're not increasing the size of the school. So is there an implication in increasing staff or what? I'd really like an answer to that.
So
And it's not for Rusty, but I think somebody was directing Rusty towards 131 spots.
So if you have a good question, Ralph, let us answer it.
Okay, I'm done.
Let's get an answer.
I'll shut up.
the ed spec itself gives you a number. So there was a number, and when we said, and I think the number was either 120 or 130. So that was in the ed spec. The fact that it's 131 in that option is simply that we had additional space. We could take it out just as easily. So the point was to show that, yes, you can accommodate the 130 on site. And what we mean by that is on one side of 32, not counting the parking spaces on the other side of 32. Generally, the biggest impact on parking is when you have events at the school, when there's open house, etc. And now you're looking at not just a 5-8 school, but you're looking at a pre-K 8 school. So staff is going to increase, and I'm assuming that when the 130 number was pulled together, it took into account all the staff, but it also has volunteers, parent volunteers, spaces for service, as well as other visitors. So that's again a number that was provided, requested in the ed spec, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ralph, do you have more?
Not at this time.
Okay, other committee members, questions? Here,
Yes, I'm sure that the bathroom doors and parking spaces are important, but more important to me is the fundamental distinction between these two projects and what each concept represents. And I can grasp, it's easier to grasp a new school site project. It seems like a generic public building on a new site where a lot of flexibility to achieve what we would like to do. What's more confusing, I think, to the public and even to this committee is when we talk about what the state terms alteration and extension. It sounds like we're recarpeting and repainting the building to me. And when I looked at everything you've done, that's clearly not the case. And my sense of it is that this is a new campus almost enveloping the original 1922 structure and even utilizing portions of it. Can you talk to that more and how we can express that better? Because I don't think it's clear to the townspeople.
Yeah, so in order to do an apples to apples comparison and to meet the educational specifications, we really went deep into what needs to happen in the existing building to be able to then say, can we achieve all the square footages, all the program spaces that are needed and that are defined in the educational specifications? And the short answer is yes, we can. But it's a major renovation in the building itself. It's not just paint and walk away. You know, if you want to achieve the science labs of size and appropriate and as defined in the ed specs, and those are very appropriate for a middle school. I think I said at the last meeting that, you know, middle school labs are now like what high school labs used to be, and that's how we're designing them. But that space doesn't exist in the appropriate area by them having the appropriate space available without taking out a wall and modifying the building itself. So we took the solutions to that level to say, in order to meet all your program requirements, we're going to do that. We're going to make it so that it meets all your program requirements, and that's what the building does. It also, you know, tries to preserve an existing building and the solutions, and we have to work around that is the historic portion of the building. So that was the goal, to say, do we meet the ed specs? Are we really trying to cram too much in here? You know, and the answer is yes, we can meet the ed spec. Now, how do we get there? That's the tougher part. Because that's what, you know, even with option 2 and 3, what you see is the more you build up against the building, the tougher it is because there's existing education going on in the building. Option 3 was developed simply to say, can we put an addition on that's further away and minimizes that disruption. But the consequence of that is that it's more square footage because we've created a link that it takes you from the existing building to the new building. And as a result of some of that, to work that out means your building increases in square footage. So that's one of the consequences of trying to save on impact on education, but adds cost to the project.
Rusty and Mike, if I might just expand, I'm not sure. I sort of heard Peter's question, but maybe in a little different light. So Scott Pellman from Colliers Project Leaders. Peter, as we've discussed, the AE or the alteration extension is specific language that the state uses when you're renovating an existing building. The intent in all of these schemes is that the building would be completely renovated top to bottom, all new building systems, everything would get corrected. So even though alteration extension sounds like you're not going the full distance, you are comparatively to a new building. You're going to do as much as you physically can to the existing structure to bring it up to a quote unquote like new status. Certainly recognizing the fact that the existing building does have limitations that aren't inherent in a new facility where, you know, adjacencies, size of rooms and all can be wide open. Now, the state will allow you, and we've talked about this, you can apply for renovation status. It's a different name change, but what comes with the name change, and we've talked about this, is that then the state will pay for anything that is a repair or a replacement of an existing system. In an AE project, which is where you start out when you file your first grant application, the state would designate it. They would give you a project number, and it would have an AE designation. Then you would apply for renovation status. The problem in this case, though, is we've looked very closely at that, and there are thresholds that you need to meet to get renovation status, and we do not feel that this project would qualify for that. You have to prove that there is a significant cost savings versus building new, and that alone as a litmus test does not hold. So even though the project is called an AE, it would be fully renovated, but the real difference is you're not getting paid. The state is not paying you for a number of the building components because you wouldn't qualify for full renovation status.
Gary?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I have two questions. One was what's meant by future ready school? There's a category, I think the fourth one down, that says future ready, if you could explain that. And then secondly, there was a comment made tonight that perhaps the option one, the new school option, didn't take into account some near site or off site improvements that would be needed. If somebody could kind of comment on that. I understand the question, what's behind it, but what would not be included perhaps in the analysis?
So I can address one part of it, and then what's not included in the analysis, maybe Scott can address. But what a future ready school is to say, you know, a modern school. If you were building a new school, you would go by some of the standards of what we now consider a future ready school. It's more flexible as it pertains to teaching and learning. There's a lot more breakout spaces. You know, it goes back to, you know, you can do small group instruction, you can have larger teams in there, but it gives you overall flexibility. Education changes constantly in terms of, you've all been to the open school concept where the whole building was open, and that was the thing at one time. And then everybody said, doesn't work. You can hear the kids, it's too disrupted, put walls up everywhere. So, you know, education evolves, and the latest thinking is that let's make it a space that is more flexible, that allows you to move and be more agile in the future as other educational priorities come on. You know, it may be a matter of more in terms of, for instance, high school, we start thinking in terms of, you know, maybe a lot of the kids are going to be doing distance learning or learning from, you know, remote learning. So that comes into play. And how do we address those issues for high school? Similarly, for middle schools, there are different ideas. And what we want to be doing is be prepared for a future learning environment. And that'll be a discussion that occurs with the educators as we, you know, everyone gets into the details of the design and, you know, what we can accomplish, how we can accomplish it. So the goal is to say, can we create a building that's future ready? The challenge in the new school is not that great because it's, again, the blank slate. The challenge on a renovation is greater, but it doesn't mean it can't be accomplished. So I believe, you know, we said that's achievable in all the different options. So it's not that the renovation would preclude you from getting a future ready school.
If I could just add a comment before Scott, before you jump in there, one of the advantages too, as flexible as we can make the learning spaces, from what I've looked at, you know, there's been a lot of concern expressed that our enrollment projection gives us 8 to 10 years, depending how you look at it. And we're going to be potentially endeavoring on a project that we're gonna be using for 50 to 100 years if the taxpayers approve it. And so there's no way for us to know what's gonna happen with enrollment, and the more flexible the school is, it allows even if there's just a bump in class sizes, and if there's a birth rate bump for a short period, it allows that flexibility where it can sort of breathe. We can move things around and increase and decrease for that bump and handle some of that, because if anything in this entire thing worries me, it's 20 years from now needing to add on. So Scott, did you want to take the answer on the offsite?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'll answer Gary's question. So, we did look, part of the site evaluation was looking at utilities, what utilities are available. And, the key for the new school site was phase 3 power. So we did include costs for tying in, bringing phase 3 power down to the site. There's 2 avenues to do that. There was sufficient power available, but I think what Gary's alluding to is potential off-site roadway improvements. Now we know with the new school, certainly I think in either case, there would be a traffic study that would be under the direction of the architect as part of the services you would seek in your RFP once the project is designed. I think all of the alteration extension options 2 and 3, have always proposed a second curb cut. I know there has been some off-site road work proposed in that area. Certainly, I understand that there is some concerns from either the intersection of 74 or 32 going up to Glass Factory Road and how that might be addressed. We do take these things into account. We do include construction contingencies to cover the unknowns. So I would anticipate a traffic study being done for both. If in fact there was off-site construction, which would not be eligible, that would still come out of the project, but we do feel that the project budgets that have been presented would be able to encumber those additional expenses.
Thank you.
Would that, can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
Would that include road on the local road side, right? Those construction costs, actual road work, Scott? I think that's what we've heard concern
Yeah,
about.
if you need to improve an intersection for sight lines, increasing radius, widening a road, maybe there's a bypass lane that needs to be added to anticipate, traffic trying to turn left into the site. So a bypass lane, all of those things would be considered.
Okay, so while it's not reimbursable because it's off-site, it's included in there's some contingency costs to include that in the project total.
Yeah, and all of that would be part of your process with your planning, zoning, town engineering departments, a traffic study to really evaluate and look at that. And it would be part of your town approvals to make sure that the final configuration in any scenario, with the extra curb cuts at Hall or the new school site would accommodate the future and additional traffic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine?
No, she's looking for the mute.
She's unmuting.
I was just jotting down my comments. So my first question, or really on all of these options, I want to echo what Jim Marshall said earlier about the level of expertise that went into all of these options. So kudos to QA&M for pulling this together in such a short time. My question is related to the options that they did create for us, more on option 2 and option 3 for Hall. I did have a concern about the increased square footage on one of the options and how that would impact not only the budget, but the schedule. It looks like the budget has increased from the original concept plans that we had received from Colliers. And I was wondering if Colliers or QA&M had taken a look at what the delta was from the original concept plans that we got from Colliers to what we're seeing out front of us now from both a budget and a schedule.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Scott Pellman from Colliers. Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, we did look at this, reviewed this with Rusty. What I'll say is option 1 and option 2, even though their square footages were slightly different than what we had done in our early concept planning, it was within 1% or so, a little bit more or less. We really felt that, changing the budgets again, we felt that the budgets were appropriate. Certainly this was a first pass. There are ways of squeaking some more square footage out of the building footprints. Option 3 was a brand new estimate that I did based on the same methodologies as option 2, the same values, same escalations. I do feel that in fact, the same time period, it may be switched around a little bit. Took a look very quickly at a high level macro schedule. We feel that 2 and 3 could be completed in approximately the same amount of time. And again, with the extension of the auditorium, so about a year longer, and then an auditorium after the fact. But option 3 did, as you've identified, had a lot more square footage in it than the option 2 did. So then you see the project budgets at the bottom. In that range right now is the without or with an auditorium. And that's kind of the range that we're giving. So 60.63 without the auditorium, up to 66.56 with an auditorium for option 1. That same approach is higher for option 2, 62.38 to 69.94 for option 2, with or without or with an auditorium. And the same holds then for option 3. That's why you see the range of the 67.56 to the 75.20.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did have one more question about the new school. So it sort of tailing on to what Gary was asking about with respect to what other costs are not part of the new school construction. I'm wondering if that option is chosen, new school, new site, and we have to find, options for what to do with center and options of what to do with hall. Hall, I guess, would revert back to the Hall Foundation. So my question is, do we anticipate any improvements or costs that we should include as part of our budget that we present to the town? Should we include any costs of having to do any improvement before we turn it back to the Hall Foundation? We may not know that answer right now, but I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I think, Catherine, you're very aware that that's not specifically called out in our charge. Thank you. I kept wanting to say charter in our charge. But obviously that's on our minds and on the public's minds. So I certainly anticipate there'll be some more conversation about it. But it's not part of our charge to determine the actual dissolution and to be able to budget for it. But we are, as you know, we're supposed to offer some ideas.
Correct, yeah. Thank you.
Ralph?
Thanks, Mike. Just to back up to one of Gary's questions with respect to future ready. And certainly Rusty and Scott can comment on this. And I'm speaking from the perspective of a structural engineer. When you're building a new building and you're considering things like that, you want your devising methods, your walls, your interior walls, to be easily dismantled and reworked or moved or whatever to accommodate differing space requirements. That gets a little tougher with an older building because some of the walls that currently divide spaces are actually structural in nature and may provide obstacles or challenges with respect to reconfiguration of space. That is one aspect of what I would interpret future ready to mean. And I welcome any comments from Rusty or Scott on what I just said.
Well, I'll say you're right on. I mean, you know, in the new building, it'll be designed so that any partitions are removable easily. So you can, you know, make a space larger or subdivided. I think part of what your budget probably is reflecting in the renovation options is that there'll be unknowns in what those walls are. I mean, we would look at them, but what we see, you know, right now may be very different in that we experienced this in the many renovations that we've done, is that when you open up the wall, that's when you really find what the true makeup of that wall is. And then you have to anticipate how you're going to make that flexible for future use. I mean, we are in our concept, we're showing many walls being demolished. And I'm sure that that impacts the cost of the project.
Scott, did you want anything to that, or do you think Rusty captured it?
No, I mean, I think Rusty captured it. I mean, I will say that again, just looking at overall project budgets, you know, we based the renovations, full renovations, based on numbers that we'd gotten recently on a couple of jobs that were gut renovations, certainly escalated those numbers, but also from a contingency standpoint, construction contingency, when you're looking between new construction and renovation, alteration, extension, we add a couple extra percentage points. And I think that information, Ralph, you should have gotten from Mike of some of the methodology we used for our estimating. But just to let everybody, there's a number of contingencies we include, but one is construction contingency, construction related issues. Typically for new construction, we include 5% within the budget, and for renovations, 7%. So that's how your budgets were resolved. So that extra 2% is in there for some of those unknowns that Rusty just pointed out, and Ralph nodded to as well. You may have some older structural walls that we just can't touch, or when you do touch them, may require a little bit more attention than we would have expected, in certainly a lot more than new construction. So that is also, those factors are taken into account and included in the overall project budgets that we developed.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the committee for QA&M? Peter?
Just following up on that, all of these concerns about existing walls and working to find solutions to that, that only applies to the 1922 structure. The U buildings, you have total flexibility in this, what is it called again,
Future ready.
Future ready, thank you, future ready conceptual planning. The U portions, which are significant in what I looked at in their proposals, are there's complete flexibility there. That's correct. And essentially, these are really two new schools. Both projects are potentially two new schools that meet the ed specs. One retains a 1922 structure that poses some challenges, but not in the rest of the complex. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's right. So anything new has that same flexibility as your new building would have. It's the challenges would be in the existing that's being renovated.
I think just a point of clarification, I think that the challenge also applies to the 1980 edition.
The portion we're keeping.
The portion we're keeping, all that stuff going out the back, the gymnasium and all that area, because that was not built with the idea of, you know, that's all block all the way up to the steel and everything.
So wherever it's bearing walls rather than structural steel.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful to me, certainly, and perhaps the rest of the committee, is are there sites that are similar? This is a tough question to ask, but similar projects to the whole school that we have that we could visit where you did this kind of alteration and extension successfully, obviously. Is there something like that we could visit?
Certainly, I mean, we can put a list together, and I'm sure Scott and Colliers also has a fairly extensive list.
That will be helpful to me.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we, because we have limited their scope of work, why don't we work on that through Scott?
Oh, sure.
Because they pretty much, they're expecting they're done tonight.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to give you any homework.
Ann. Unmute.
When I looked at the concept plans, it really occurred to me that we had 2 of each classrooms. And I know this is really an ed spec topic, but this year and next year of our K1, 2, 3, 4, 3 of those classes have 3 sections with 3 classrooms. So I think we have to be sure when we're laying out our final architectural design that we have enough flex space within those wings that we can accommodate those extra classrooms if we need them. Because I think one of Willington's greatest assets is the fact that we have such wonderful class sizes. And I hate to lose that with having just 2 of each classroom. Thank you.
Hang on to that. We'll want to keep that thought in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for QA?
I'll just say thanks. So I'm going to be honest, I was unsure of what we were going to get in a concept plan, and then I wasn't sure it was going to be useful, and I found it useful, and you turned it around very fast. So thank you for your work. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you guys blew it out of the water for the time frame and all that. Yeah. So thank you very much. All right, and you guys, please don't feel like you need to sit here.
We'll leave the boards with you.
Yeah, you want to, are those your easels?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so leave the boards if you would, and feel free to take your easels.
Yes.
All right, just hang on everyone while we give them a minute to pack out. In the meantime, we can return to item 4 on the agenda where we were before, approval of meeting minutes. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes of January 4th, 23 regular meeting?
So moved.
And I have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Do we have discussion? Any additions or corrections? Good night, gentlemen. Thank you again. All right, seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays or abstentions? All right, motion carries. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes for the SBC Finance Committee 12/21/22? And a second, please.
A second.
Any additions or corrections or comments on that one? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passes. All right, on to communications. Everything that I have for communications, other than administrative stuff like questions being answered between myself and Phil, or one of the members asking me a clarity on something, other than those, any of the actual communications, anything of import has been shared to everyone. And again, my apologies on that board, that comparison board getting out late to you guys this afternoon. So any questions on communications? I did also, just since it's sort of in the world of communications, I did, as we talked about, I sent out all of the emails. It took a little while to figure out how to PDF it, but I figured that way everyone could see it. Anything else? Any questions on communications?
I have one, Mike.
Okay.
And it may be better suited for the a later agenda item under subcommittee reports. But one of the things I'm concerned about is seeing the comments that have been added when people take the survey. I've seen the emails, and thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity to go through them, but I have not seen any summary or actual comments from the survey.
So let's talk about it in the item 6A sub I.
That's fine.
Okay. Anything else for communications? All right, let's move to subcommittee reports. Communications.
So there are 112 digital responses to the survey so far. I looked right before the meeting tonight. Boxes are still in the relocations. I don't know what's in them. We won't pull those until the end. And I think that I thought that we had decided that we were not going to look at survey results until the end,
Right.
because we were going to tally all the information and then use that as part of our final push. So unless I'm wrong, I thought that's what we were doing. I haven't gone through, I just opened and I can see the Excel spreadsheet that pops up and the number. But it's just by timestamp. You can see when it came in. If there's any comments, you'll see all the comments, and anything anyone wrote in, you'll see those.
Right, as I remember, if I remember correctly, we were running the survey through the 28th. Is that
I
correct?
think it's through the 30th.
Oh, the 30th. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. There's a lot of dates that I'm.
Yeah, I might be in the same spot, so.
Swimming around in my head. So then we'll have to figure out in the 2 days between that and the February 1st meeting, we'll have to figure out how to get that shared out so that people can see it.
I will, and I'll pull together some graphs and things and try and sort it, because it's, right now, it's just by timestamp, when the person filled it out. I'll try and pull together yeses and nos for each section. I'll try and kind of lumps, you'll get the whole set of data, but the responses that are in text, I'll try and organize so if there's similar thoughts, things like that.
Yeah.
You'll be able to, will be a good snapshot for the public, but you'll see the whole spreadsheet. And then I'll try and do
A summary.
a summary in 24 hours.
It's not atypical to not, you're not looking at survey results as the survey is an action, right? You wait until the survey is complete to see it. So it's not as though you would typically, in any survey, get the results you want. Unfiltered and unbiased results, which is
Right.
why.
Typical, yes,
Right.
typical survey procedure is not to delve into the results,
Correct.
because then there's the opportunity for people to communicate about what way it's going.
Right.
Or the question that did somebody communicate about what way it's going.
Move on to the second day.
Yes, go ahead.
The question earlier, if I can ask
Please.
it now, we're in the right part of the agenda. So if we want to get a sense of some of these comments that are being made in the survey, but less so the mathematics of the final tally, I get that. I don't want to tamper with the survey process. But I think it would be interesting to see what the comments are that people are making. We heard some tonight. Is there a way just to access where there's a pile of stuff is electronically and scroll through them? Is that possible?
I think the problem with that is you're starting to delve into the results of the survey, and you're also only seeing the electronics. You're not seeing what's in the boxes. So like if there's a certain group of people in town who are more likely to use the boxes to submit, like people who aren't as computer savvy or interested, and they're putting stuff in the boxes, you may not be seeing that information, because that's not tallied in the electronic version of the survey. So if we start looking at the electronic and we see comments that indicate a certain direction or whatever, we're not gonna see the rest of the comments. What if the ones in the paper ballots are leaning in another direction? It might skew our perception of what's happening.
I think any access to the data can be considered manipulating the data. Right, and so that's what we're trying to not have any access to, because the comments were based upon, for most people, the responses to the questions. If yes, if no, then, some of your comments on that. So I think seeing some of the comments will lead us to.
I'm confused.
But we wouldn't have a survey, we got
Looking
information.
at comments being manipulating anything, I'm just looking at them.
Well, it's considered in survey world that's the potential to manipulate. Because then people in the public can say, oh, well, you're seeing how it's trending, and you might pattern your message to the public now based on what you're seeing for trends?
I kind of view it as a giant present to speak. It's curious to know what people are thinking.
Yes, I think we all are.
We all are.
This seems like a good way to do it to me. I don't see how we would skew any.
Well, you're seeing some of it in the emails,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So there's a lot of information in the emails.
And it's all over the board. I'm sure the surveys are all over the board as well.
Yeah.
I think what we wanted was feedback from the public, and that survey is gonna give us that feedback. So I think everybody's curious to see what it says, but I wanna see what the full complete survey told us. Not in the interim, because it's just a snapshot, and it does give folks the ability to, and when I say folks, I mean the public, to think that we are manipulating the data that's coming in, and if we don't have any access to it, we're not doing anything except putting the information out there and asking people to fill it out.
So in other words, you can't get access to it.
I don't think we should at this point. Catherine, what do you have for thoughts?
I was just gonna say, the survey is one method of communicating to the public. And I too am very curious what people did fill out on the survey. So I share that sentiment with Peter and the rest of the folks on the committee, but I do feel like the survey is just one option. I mean, this meeting is our ability to communicate with the public and hear their thoughts. So that will tell us, like John Blessington came on and shared his thoughts. So we know how he feels. People have been coming to the community outreach events that Phil's been doing and sharing their thoughts. So I see this, I understand where Peter's coming from, but I see this as just one way to communicate and get that information, where we've already gotten quite a bit of feedback and quite a bit of understanding from the public as to which direction they're going. It just hasn't been like in a tallied or some kind of spreadsheet. Maybe that what some people are looking for. That's
I'll be honest, I hate that I feel like the correct answer is to not look at it, because I really want to look at it. I just feel like despite really wanting to see it, the better thing to do is let the survey conclude and look at the results.
And Mike, that's fine. I don't disagree with that thinking. But if someone said no and then had a detailed explanation as to why, I think that's pertinent information for all of us to make up our own minds.
Yes.
I think we're going to get that. I don't think anybody's doubting that we're going to get all that information, just not before the survey is complete.
I understand, but that leaves us a little bit better than a day to observe it and contemplate it all. And quite frankly, I don't like that. I don't think that's enough time.
It is a tight time frame, absolutely.
The timeframe we all.
Can I just make a comment about that? Please. We're gonna hear from the public on January 26th. So I would expect that the same comments we're gonna hear, I hope, on January 26th are similar comments to what we're gonna hear in the surveys. So, I mean.
But it may not be the same group of people.
You're right, we may not know who they are.
112 surveys right now out of how many residents do we have?
5,500.
Just
Yeah.
to put it in perspective.
Okay, so anything else on the survey? All right, January 26th, public forum coming up.
So I'll tell you my thoughts, and then I just want to make sure we have a plan for how it's going to run. I don't think we should have a presentation that night, and I think we could bury the presentation that we've done 455 times. I think there's a 2-slide presentation, and it's simply the overall cost and then some sort of slide about mill rate impact. And I want to stop saying mill rate because I'm not sure everyone really understands what that means. And maybe say tax increase instead. And then just open up. And I think the committee needs to determine, is this a Q&A Or is it similar to what, I'm sorry, what was the group that did the warehouse? Was it
A
PZC?
public hearing.
When they just gave feedback, that they didn't respond back to the person speaking at the mic, are we answering questions? Or are we just hearing feedback? I think that's important for us to know, because it impacts how we put out an agenda.
My feeling is it should be Q&A. I think we've been saying for a while, particularly when we have when we have a standard restriction on present to speak, that we can't do back and forth interaction, because that is the proper Robert's rules way of doing it.
Yeah.
I think that the January 26th event is a good opportunity, and we've been telling people, if you want to do Q&A, come see us on the 26th, because we can do Q&A on the 26th. So I think we want to leave that option, I think, is critical in my mind.
I hope so too.
Gary?
Sorry. So I was going to suggest what I've done similar things or led similar things like that before. A good thing to do is let people speak and ask, make their comments and ask their questions. Somebody should write those questions down. And then we go through the questions, or somebody leads through the questions, answers. Maybe some people have the same question, 3-4 people have the same question. You can answer those and save time by not answering everybody's question right after they speak. And I also would say that there's got to also be an opportunity for somebody to correct things that are stated that aren't true or aren't right about the process. So I would say, let's hear from the community all at once, write those things down, and then, whoever's it's decided responds, does that afterwards.
I think that's a great idea.
I agree with Gary, Mike, but
Hang on, I've got one in the room here. Go
all
ahead.
right, never mind.
I agree with Gary, but I think it would probably be easiest served. It is a regular meeting. It would be the whole commission there. If the questions and answers are directed through the chair. We all are passionate about the topic. The committee.
Oh, I'm sorry. Planning and zoning.
We all like to speak. I've been guilty more than once of jumping in, and there's that tendency to, but if we are very clear on the process going in and the comments are directed towards Mike, and if he feels there's someone on the committee that is best served to respond to that, whether it be himself or the superintendent or another member. That would be my suggestion, is handle the way Gary's suggesting, and then it all flow through the chair. So we wait to be recognized before discussion.
Ralph, go ahead.
No, Catherine had her hands up first.
Ralph, go ahead.
All right. I agree with Gary, except for the likelihood that, all right, we collect a bunch of questions and we attempt to address them, which is likely to beget more questions. And somehow we need to be able to be flexible enough to deal with that.
Okay, good thought. Catherine?
I think I agree with what Gary was saying with maybe a slight modification. Could we have the people write down their questions instead of us writing down the questions, have them write down the questions and submit them to us? Or maybe have some kind of structured sign-up sheet so that there is some kind of order to the questions and answers. I also agree with what Ralph was saying too. Some of the questions might turn into more questions, and we have to be flexible enough to respond to that and have some kind of format of how we're going to do that.
Gary?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have that option. I think we did that at the last meeting we had in the auditorium. I would just say one of the reasons that I think it's good to write things down or us to write them down is people feel heard when you do that, and people see their question written down, in writing. It clicks with some people that, okay, you heard what I have to say, and either you've answered it or you're going to come back to it later. So that's really a part of why I suggested that. But I also do like the idea of allowing people to write their questions. Some people feel more comfortable doing that than speaking publicly, so I think that's fine too.
If I could, during Bill's road show, he asked people to write down their questions and gave them cards. I would say more often than not, people did not do that. They started off with that, but felt more comfortable having open conversation, and that may have been, with the exception of the last meeting, the small numbers of people in the room. But I think, to Gary's point, if we write them down, then we have them, right? So the idea was to collect them, when Phil did that. That still didn't always happen. But if we write them down, it'll give an opportunity. Mike may be able to answer 5 of them quickly, and 1 or 2 may take a little bit more research to make sure we get an accurate answer. And then we have a list of them coming out of that meeting. And I do not volunteer to write them down. Oh, look, Brianna put her hand up quickly. No, one will be able to repeat.
Yeah, I agree. Writing down the questions is good and having that information collected for us as the subcommittee, but I would like this event, 'cause I've been doing the same thing. I've been just telling people, I know our present to speaks are difficult and one-sided. So come to the meeting of the 26th. I've been encouraging a lot of people to do that. I'm concerned about people being limited in their ability to talk to us, but we'll collect your questions and we'll get to you at the end kind of approach. I'd like this to be as free flowing as possible. I didn't attend the distribution center in person. I listened to some of them, but I sensed it allowed people to vent, it allowed people to ask their questions.
I will say, I think for the good of the order, I would not run a meeting that was that open. There were Rodney Dangerfield impressions going on and stuff that had nothing to do. It was so far off topic. I will not run a meeting like that. I want the public to be able to ask any questions, but they've got to be on topic. And that was far too free.
I'm not going there. I guess I've had enough of those. But I think it's important for people to be able to ask their questions, not be shouted down. With all due respect to Gary, I'm concerned about the notion of what's termed disinformation and what isn't. That feels like censorship to me. But your question doesn't matter because you're not.
I don't believe he was saying that. I think what he was saying, if someone has an understanding that's blatantly incorrect, we want to correct it.
That's
How we got to a land for.
No, that's how we
defines what's blatantly
So
incorrect.
clearly, how we got to the land identification is a process where we would correct, right? So we can give corrections. The cost of the projects are blatant misinformation. If someone gave it.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
So.
And Erica, I would be careful, but what I don't want to see it happen is us we're the committee members, with the superintendent, all of this authority over speaking for townspeople because they feel that happens to them a lot. I talk to them and they say, I go to these meetings and I'm told I'm a fool because I didn't attend 3 other meetings. Well, I'm coming, I'm trying to find out understand what's happening. And people feel bullied by the experts.
I am sure some people feel that way, and I would endeavor to prevent that from happening, but not everyone is gonna agree that they got their voice heard. But I would endeavor to make sure that everyone has their opportunity and they don't feel bullied about their answer. But I will not allow a Rodney Dangerfield. So there are some lines, but
I guess I missed that event.
I think it's important to remember too, that we scheduled hour-long Q&A sessions after presentations. I don't think there was a single one that was under 2 hours. Every single one, every presentation that we did, we stated, we answered questions, and it was respectful and it was back and forth. I think we have provided significant opportunity for people to have their questions answered. They might not like the answer because it is a fact and it's not what they want to hear based upon what they support. But we do have facts about the projects. And that's our job to share that information. It doesn't matter what project it is to me. I'm going to give the fact on that if I'm the one answering. So I think that's your point, Mike.
Right.
And I think that, the expectation that we're going to interrupt that didn't happen the first time we did it. The first presentation we did, we had questions back and forth and there was interruptions. you know, if someone didn't like something I was saying, it was stopped. I think actually you addressed it. So I think that it's gonna be fine. I just want to make sure I understood the format. So when we do an agenda, you and I have a good sense of, we can write an agenda that matches what we're going to try and do, and the committee is looking for as far as getting feedback, giving responses, but also allowing people just to share their opinions.
Yeah.
Good.
I think that last part is really important, because I think more people than not may just have an opinion to share with us and not necessarily a question. Right, the last 2 weeks ago, I think we had a forum here in this room. And there was a lot of free-flowing conversation, and some people's.
It was a
just
really good
opinion.
session.
It was really, really good. And so, you know, I think we may, if we have a general concept of how the meeting will run, I think we have the ability to pivot, and Mike can direct us in that, keeping us on topic and getting everybody's thoughts heard, whether it be a question or just comment.
Two hands. It is very important to me, and to try to then to again address your concern. I would never feel it's appropriate for this committee or any other public organization to try to correct people's feelings. Only facts about the topic. You know, this particular thing is 80,000 square feet versus 100,000 square feet, things like that. That's the only thing I feel it's important to correct, not to dissuade people or discourage certain feelings about it, or their desire to approve or disapprove it. I would never, that's the kind of thing that we can't do. That's the kind of thing we want to hear, not dissuade.
I certainly hope so. The concern I have, and you touched on it earlier, Mike, if I could just respond.
Yes.
Is at the last event we had in the whole school, the first one, which was disappointing. That was its turnout, obviously. I disciplined myself prior to the meeting and said, well, this is gonna be a presentation by Phil and Scott. And I didn't think it was appropriate, you know, for me to comment on that. I want to hear from the public. And then when we did hear from the public, individual members of our committee would just opine. And if someone expressed a particular opinion or perspective, we'd say, well, no, that's incorrect because I'm on the committee and X. And I guess I'm wondering how this is going to work. If questions come in, are members of this committee going to do the same thing? I was troubled by it, to be honest with you, because it felt like, again, the experts were dismissing people who were asking questions or expressing points of view.
All I can say is I feel like I've answered this question in a couple different ways over the last 5 minutes. And I would take that same process and that same thought into this January 26th thing. That no one on this committee or anybody else should be dissuading people from opinions or their feelings about things. But clarification of facts or answering questions might be like, there might be something about finance that you're the appropriate one to answer, or Justin, because you're on the finance subcommittee. There might be a question about something more about the ed spec that Phil is the right person to answer. So I think there are opportunities for any member of the board to be that valuable member for that particular question. So should people be opining on their own personal feelings? No, but that's not our job here anyway. Our job is to try to make a learned decision about what to recommend. So part of how we get learned about things is to listen to the public. But I feel like I've answered that 3 or 4 times now, so I'd like to move on to a bunch of other committee members. Chris Talona, you haven't spoken yet tonight.
Is there an intention of us having the surveys paper format possibly at the 26th meeting, that way kind of to resolve some of these ideas about people sharing their thoughts? That would be an opportunity for them to share it with us as a committee, but also permanently put it down on paper, submit it, that we would then have a more long-term copy of what the folks have to say, rather than just writing down their question and answering it. They would be able to also voice their opinion, and we would have a copy of it.
That's a great idea, and I think we would just make sure to issue the instruction to people. If you've already filled the survey out and send it in, please don't do it again, because we don't want people stacking the surveys.
Bring the box, put it in.
Oh. Thank you, Chris. Good idea. Brianna, you also haven't had a turn tonight.
Hi. Okay, I just was gonna ask if somewhere towards the beginning of our forum, could you please restate our charge, particularly the part about how we're trying to get a pre-K to 8 school building?
I have to get it out to read it again. It's like, well, we can't.
I've got it here. I don't know if you need all of the
Oh, that
pieces.
night. I thought you were asking me
Yeah.
to restate it right now.
No, I'd be happy to perform it for, no, just kidding. Yeah, I think.
Okay, good. Brianna's gonna present the charge.
I'll have costumes and everything, no. But I have, we all say we hear things, which is very vague and not citing specific sources whatsoever, but a few comments that I have come across mentioned something about taking care of doing something with center and doing something with hall, and that is what we should do, but that does not meet our charge. So it's not really something that we can consider or comment on. I feel like I think that's important to say when we gather again with the public. And then I was thinking that when I'm sitting there at the forum on January 26th, I am there for two things, right? I'm there to hear what the people of Willington have to say, because they're going to help me decide what I want to say and what I think is best for our Willington students, the ones we have now and the ones that we have coming up in the future. Listening to my fellow community members helps me create and enhance some of my own thoughts, and it helps me think of questions that I maybe wouldn't have thought of by myself. So that's why I'm looking forward to that event, because I want to hear from those people. And sometimes the answers that our chairperson or a superintendent or a selectman give is information I need or I need to hear again. And then the other reason to sit there, of course, is because I do hope that we can help people understand where we've been, what we're doing, where we're going, and why. We have given our folks a lot of opportunities to learn, lots of different ways to learn. We can watch YouTube video of our meetings. We can look at our minutes. We can go to the website. We can email the committee directly. There's a lot of things that they can do. And unfortunately, it feels a little frustrating to me, but unfortunately, we can't go to everybody's house and sit down and have tea and ask them what they would like. It's really up to the folks to come to us. And so I look forward to our forum on the 26th. I hope we can help clarify some facts, some truths, and help people understand. And also, I really just want to hear from my community, our community, because I have to make a very important recommendation to this committee on February 1st, and I take it really seriously. Thanks.
Thank you. Catherine?
Brianna took the words right out of my mouth. She said it so beautifully. No, I do echo what Brianna was saying. I think sitting on the forum will give us an opportunity to listen to additional people and what they have to say about both options and about the work that we've done. And I think it is going to help each and every one of us really solidify where we stand with our votes. I actually raised my hand for a logistical concern that was brought up after the presentation that we had in Hall Gymnasium was regarding the sound. And as the chair at the time, I remember not being heard very well. So I just, from a logistical formatting point, Phil, I was just curious if it's going to be the same format or if there's a way we can have maybe a couple microphones at the panel so that people can hear us and we can hear them.
Do the best of what we have. I mean, I don't know how Mike D'Amato set it up.
We had 4 mics.
You had table mics though.
Yeah. Maybe we can logistically sit down with what he did and with what you have.
Yeah, I mean, we could mess with it again. I don't know.
I think that night we only had one.
Right. We worked with what the school had, so maybe we put what we have and what the school has and see if they can't work together.
But I just, Catherine, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. because people were saying they couldn't hear us, and that was the first 30 seconds. Everything else that was in the mic, said into the microphone could be heard.
So I heard from folks in the room who could hear us when we talked to them, but they couldn't hear the person talking at the microphone as they were talking towards us. So that to me is logistics. We move where the speaker was, similar to how the public hearings went in the room, so they kind of went every direction.
I mean,
So-
just a simple suggestion, can we pull the tables forward? And maybe that's what you were talking about, Erica, just bring the tables closer to the bleachers.
A little that we can change where people stand to ask their question. They were facing us, so the people behind them didn't hear the sounds going this direction.
Right,
So,
right.
a little bit of
You couldn't see the
reorganization.
screen, they couldn't see the big screen on the stage, no one could see anything.
And I too, I heard some feedback from that evening, and I did not get the sense at all that anybody was feeling bullied at all with their questions. The feedback I got from the people I spoke to was it was very informative. They learned some things that they did not know. And they thought it was a good communication going back and forth. Thank you.
The only other thing I have about the January 26th, now that we've talked about it, Mike, is that it's, if we get out a postcard tomorrow, I think when you get to the finance report, I can show the postcard I showed them tonight. It does say, if we can get this out like tomorrow and they can turn it around fast, it does have the advertisement on the back of it for community forum, January 26th, in person or via Zoom, and it's got the meeting ID on it. So this would hit every household again, as we intended to the first time, if we get this out in time. So FYI to that. You want me to do the last thing?
Anything else on the January 26th?
One more thing, Mike, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I just want to build on something Phil said earlier about the public outreach, the 6 sessions. I think, yes, there was a lot of good discussion after the presentation was over with. Sum total of 6 sessions, maybe we had 2% of the population in those meetings. And those discussions were only heard by that 2% of the population. So we need to be careful on the 26th so that we can capture not only what those folks had to say, but what the folks who have never been to any of those sessions had to say. And that's my only comment.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Brianna took your hand back down.
Yeah, I'll say, I just wanted to remind everyone that you do have a very capable and beautiful secretary, who I'm sure would be great at writing down the questions that people ask during the forum. And Phil, you'll have your presentation on hand, right? Like, if you need to access a slide or something, could somebody whip that up? Okay,
It'll be up.
all right.
Concept plans too.
Catherine?
Oh, I was just gonna say to Ralph's comment that, yes, it may have represented the 2% of the population, but it could have been a different 2% of that population from each one of those sessions. I know I attended at least 2 of them, and the questions that were asked at those separate sessions were completely different. I don't think I heard a duplicate question from those 2 sessions that I attended. So I know what you're saying, Ralph, but I just feel like I don't know how much more we can do as a committee as far as reaching out there. We've given every opportunity for people to come and listen in and be a part of our process. So that was it.
Well, you know, Mike, I'm sorry, I have to add to that.
Hang on, Ann has her hand up though. Ann, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
The other opportunity people had to hear the presentation was when we heard it. They may have watched the recording. Also, there was that little thing you could access through your phone on the last mailing so that everyone could see the presentation that way too. So I think more people saw it than we are aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Ralph, go ahead.
Never mind, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. I had a point, but I'll come back to it sometime.
Okay, so on the rest of the communications plan,
Do you have anything else? I know we had talked about essentially.
go ahead, Ralph.
Okay, I had sent you an email, Mike, about no notice of the January 26th forum on the town website, nothing on the town calendar, nothing on the town's SBC webpage, nothing on the SBC's calendar. And I don't think I found anything on the SBC page on the school website. And we're trying to reach the public. And we have a public forum, what, next week? That's poor. I'm sorry.
We'll, I think we can look at improving that in a couple of the spaces. I think we can, it's pretty easy to get it on like the town calendar and stuff.
Is he looking for a response?
Homepage,
That's my response.
Perfect.
isn't that? I see a lot of town events that are on that homepage, like pop out at you, like, why could this be like that?
Well, we can make sure that it's on the, you're talking about on the town's website.
Yeah,
front
when
page,
you
yeah.
first get on, there'll be things there like the trunk or treat and all. Why can't this be like popping out at you?
I think it can easily be. I'm sure we can get it on the calendar so it pops up on the. Just like when I looked at it, I think today I looked at it and it had the events that are today and tomorrow are on that front page. So,
The informational handout, the things that are, yeah, we can put anything the committee would like there. Just say the word.
yeah, I think, any place that we can reasonably get that, particularly on the town calendar so that it pops up on that news feed sort of thing that you've got in front of you.
And it, to the calendar portion, it's a meeting, and once it's warned as a meeting, it will.
Yeah.
It will
It
go
will
on the
populate,
calendar.
it'll populate
An
automatically.
email will
anyway.
generate, an agenda will be out there, so that's just another way, but sure.
Okay, now on to the communications plan.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann, go ahead.
One more thought, we can also notify the parents through the school email system. And then Phil, would it be appropriate to do one of those call notifications, or is that not really in the purview? The parent call
I'm
notification?
just gonna remind the committee that this is the mailer that went out that very clearly on the front says January 26th Community Forum. I'm not trying to be a wise guy, but if this doesn't meet, like, I don't know what else we can do. We can put it on more websites and things, but this went to every household. So Ralph, do you want to email me and I'll get to stuff to put on the website? I don't know that you need to send that to the full committee, I'll be honest. If you just sent that to me, I probably would have just put them on and we didn't really need a discussion on it.
I agree. We talk all the time about how to get people in the room. And we wish we had the resources to send a mailer for every big meeting that we had, and we don't. For this one, we did. So we have informed, at every citizen. So there's no reason we can't do more, but every household got one.
And we have a
Even the town
$65 million project and we have 3 people sitting in the room. So I'm not sure posting something on a website, I'm sorry. This really gets to me. I'm not sure what else we could do for communication if that's gonna make the difference. We did 6 sessions and we had 100 people total. So maybe feeding people, I don't know.
130.
Something does occur to me, Phil mentions that thing the town has where if you subscribe to all the meetings, it tells you when they are.
They go out.
When an agenda.
They go
goes,
out.
Can we send this out to that same network?
Every single
think
time
it's all
we
every
do
time.
one, they go out.
Every time this is generated, it goes to the town.
No,
clerk,
I
it
know
goes on
that.
the website.
Yeah, the flyers,
See
yes.
that thing Phil just held up, go out?
Every time these, so if there's the informational flyer, it goes out. If we do a new one, it goes out. Any of those things that we get, that is like a big mailer for us, it goes to the digital backpack, it goes to the town mailer, it goes on the website.
Bill goes through his school to do it, and he comes through my office to get it out in the town.
Yeah, I've been getting it through the email and through the digital backpack because of the kids in the school.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think the question on the communications plan underneath our report, Mike, was particularly around email. and you are making a decision as chair to send those emails out. We just need to tweak our plan to say that you're doing that. I don't think it's an issue. Just simply because we voted on it, it's something that we can tweak it and just bring it back. You and I just need to connect on that with Ann. And we can bring it back to the committee.
Yeah, I made sort of an executive decision that because the communication plan didn't include sharing the emails amongst the committee, I just sort of made the executive decision that seemed that it was within what we would want to be doing to understand what the public's saying. And that's why I just went ahead and jumped on that thing and sent out the PDFs of the emails. And that's what Phil's talking about. We should just add that to the communications plan to include that information.
Sorry, and I had one last communications thing. We have scheduled 2 times at the transfer station this weekend, Saturday, 1 to 3 p.m. Ralph and I have been the only ones there each time. Mike stopped in for a little bit, and Sunday is 12 to 2. I cannot be there. My daughter's got a soccer game that was scheduled on Saturday. So it would be very smart for 2 people to be there on Saturday from 1 to 3. I will be there on Sunday from 12 to 2. If someone would like to volunteer their time on Saturday, 1 to 3, all the items will be there. Whoever that is.
I can do that. Welcome anyone else.
I might be able to.
Even if it's an hour, I think, people can shuffle in and out, but that's, it's short notice, sorry.
Okay, well, if you feel you have time and you can join, just if you get there and there's a bunch of members already, just wave and say hello and carry on.
I will be there
Okay. Great.
both days.
Anything else in communications?
I don't know.
I don't see any more. All right. Land assessment. I only have a couple of items. One, there have been some questions in the public and also in present to speak about the evaluation of the properties. I just wanted to clarify, there was in fact a spreadsheet with the 120 whatever properties on it that Scott maintained. Scott probably still has it. Yep, he's nodding his head. All along through the process, all of us on the land subcommittee and the full committee agreed that our process needed to be documented and defendable, and that documentation does exist. On the private property for the potential new school build, the phase 2 environmental survey has been going on, and we have draft partial results of the process, which talk about 2 areas that were identified as being worthy of looking into and exploring, just because the type of items found there. One of those was a small section that appeared to have what might have been a little bit of household dumping, like is very typical of all the, like, if you go around all the properties in Willington behind stone walls, you often find bottles and cans and stuff, because that's where people put that kind of garbage back in the day, 100 years ago, or whatever that day was. So there's a small area like that was identified, and so then the process for that area is to look at the soil and see if anything has leached into it. That process is going on right now, just to assure that nothing leaked into the soil from whatever was dumped there. It's just, it's an ultra careful process. We see something that might be an issue and we'll investigate it. There's another area there where some poles that might have been telephone poles, some wooden poles have been stacked, and the soil is being tested for if anything like creosote or whatever has leached into the soil from the poles. So we're waiting for the lab results for that to come back. And then this past week, some monitoring wells were drilled on the site to do sampling of groundwater to see if there's anything to be concerned with. So that's where we are on the environmental.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Scott? Is it unusual? I know we've heard some comments from people in the public with concerns about the land, or should we have had a second site prepared for new school? Are we in line with where a typical process for a potential new site would be? and answering some of those environmental questions, et cetera?
Yeah, no, we're doing all the appropriate due diligence, to look at that piece of land. So I guess if that's the question, just comparing the ability to find a suitable piece of land, your neighbors, Mansfield, exhausted that completely, looked at trying to squeeze a school onto their existing middle school site and ended up building a new school back on the existing school site, a little bit larger of a parcel, than you had. So, I think overall, it's hard to find an undeveloped parcel of land in Connecticut that may or may not have had some type of use in the past, be it farmland or whatever. But we are following all the required protocols and testing to make sure that if the new school option is an option that is selected, that we're confident that we're not going to run into any issues.
Thank you.
And then part of that question also, Scott, was, is there any value, or is there a reasonable part of the process to have a backup site? I'm assuming based on our land assessment process that having a backup site is really something you would only go to if you found problems, because otherwise you'd be spending money on two sites, or you'd potentially have to have letters of intent locking in two sites.
Yeah, that's correct. In the matrix that I put together in the sites that we walked with the committee, and there was a number of other sites that we did walk. Certainly the site that was identified as far as its central location, adjacency to utilities, its lack of water, its minimal topography, meaning hills. Willington is a very, very hilly community, as well as it's adjacency to some other maybe inappropriate things, or just too far out into a residential area where you were talking about having to bring three-phase power, not just a few miles, but multiple miles up, and a very thin, twisty road. So there was one other site that had more potential, I think, than the others, but I think with the matrix, the discussions that we did, the site that's on the table, just from a location standpoint, available utilities, looking at the development and the level land, was far superior to any of the other ones we walked or considered.
Okay. Anything else on land assessment? Okay, moving on to finance. Gentlemen.
Justin and I met here. It was a bit confusing.
Although we recovered in like 9 minutes, so I think that's pretty good.
We did. And had a productive meeting, I think. I do have our latest expenditure report. We can dispense with that first, I think.
Thank you.
And this is what you've seen before. I apologize, I don't have electronic copy. But I'm sure,
Can you email it to everyone?
yes,
I have it.
yeah, I don't have an electronic version of the scan, I guess. Again, our $200,000 budget is now formally expended 49,000. We have 91,000 encumbered, meaning we're going to spend that money, obviously. But we have a fairly healthy balance here at the moment, of 58,000. So I feel a certain level of comfort with that. I think all of this is easily explainable. I know we get questions from the public on how we're spending our money and what it's for. The bulk of it is obviously Collier's, environmental studies, legal, where you see all the Halloran and Sages. And then toward the bottom, the more recent encumbrances. At the very bottom, you see the big number for our concept plans for $20,000, or actually 19,500. So I think everything is in order and relatively up to date. And we should probably keep this in hand when we're with the public, because these questions have come up And I don't think it's undergone forward here. Other than, I'll just remind everyone that I guess we have that bucket of legal money available to us. So that's the 10,000 that we voted on to have available in anticipation that we may need the attorney. Hopefully less, but time will tell. So that's where we are with expenditures. Any questions on that? I think it's straightforward. Obviously, you guys can't ask questions because I'm looking at the hard copies.
Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you for putting that together, Peter, but I feel somewhat that it's unfortunate that the committee doesn't have it in front of them to ask the appropriate questions. So I would suggest that for our next meeting, that it does get handed or emailed to the chair so that they can share it with the rest of the committee and have this on an update for our next meeting as well, so that we can properly ask any questions if we need to. Thank you.
Absolutely, and the chair does have it.
Can you read it?
Does he have it electronically?
Yeah, can you see it right there?
Oh, yeah, I get it. So what is the balance?
No, we will make sure this one is emailed out right away and
58,641, Catherine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And part of the challenge with it getting out to committee members, unfortunately, was when the subcommittee was able to meet was earlier today. So there wasn't time to produce it and get it out. But that we'll try to make sure we don't have that stack up problem in the future.
Thank you.
And Erica's going to work on emailing it right now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I didn't know where to put this feedback in my conversations with residents. And it's mostly related to finance, so I felt this was an appropriate time. And these are questions that I'm hearing. What are the collateral costs resulting from a new site's decision? And by collateral costs, what they're asking about is items that are not under our charge. What are the short-term loan and bonding costs? What other town entities are considering jumping onto this bond for their needs? What will be the approximate property tax increases to pay back the bond? And there was a discussion tonight with the finance subcommittee about how to present that. One of the strange comments I heard was that if Paul is handed back to the foundation, that property would then become taxable, wouldn't it? And we would be able to pay off the school bond with the approximately $16,000 tax bill that we'll get from the Hall Foundation. I'm not sure, and Mike, I know you've done some research into this. I don't know how they qualify under their 501c3 category. And then the final question is, in what condition do we leave these buildings once the school abandons them? These are just topics that I've been hearing, and I wanted to share that with the group. That's all.
I will say I agree. Those are topics that we are definitely hearing about, and some of those are within our charge or our ability to try to answer, and some are just not. Yeah, I'm not sure. Do you have anything on response to any of those, Peter, from your subcommittee?
Sort of. We talked about what all of us have, those different spreadsheet scenarios that Bill provided to us about a month ago. The four different options that we had, the 1, the 1A, so on and so forth. And we were talking about the formatting there. And I apologize again, but I couldn't link into the Wi-Fi here. I left my hotspot cell phone in my office. I looked at that more carefully, and I think what would be helpful, and Justin and I talked about this, when you look at that spreadsheet, it's just kind of an abstraction where you're going from year to year with increase to increase, but you're not really understanding how you're impacted personally. And that's how we're trying to put ourselves into the place of Joe Q. Public. So what I did was I just took the mill rate at the beginning of Phil's spreadsheet, what I call it Phil's spreadsheet, but the scenarios, and I said, this is where you're starting. And then here's your tax bill. And I used a $135,000 benchmark that Phil gave us as the new average assessment account. And then I took the end mill rate and tax assessment and that tax bill on $135,000. And that kind of gives you a sense of, okay, I went from here right now to 6 years at the end of the project. This is my tax impact. This is my assessment. This is my increase. This is the total dollars I'll experience as an increase over 6 years. I will send that to you, Mike, and everyone else.
Okay.
I think that might be helpful. We also talked about these extra costs Ralph mentions. I didn't go into the conditional hall school potential cost there, but things like the bonding cost, it's a footnote at the bottom of the spreadsheet.
Right.
I would suggest, and Justin and I talked about it, that we just include that in the cost of this to the town. I recognize it's not part of the reimbursables cost that Scott's concerned about, but we're not doing this for OCGR. We're doing this for our own residents.
Right.
And we want them to understand that. I would also suggest, we also talked about the assumption at the top of the spreadsheet where it says 2.5% increase in the town budget from year to year. That seems improbable to me, given the inflationary environment that we're in. So we're thinking some adjustments there. We should look at those. What if we make that something more realistic right now? Say, dare I say it, 4 or 5%, and not be unreasonable right now. Maybe it tapers down to like 3% based on what economists are saying as we move forward in that 6 years. But we probably want to throw a more real number there. So people don't think we're just cooking the numbers here to come out a certain way. So we talked about that as well. And we also talked about that end mill rate that we come to, which is 44, I think, or 43 point something. How does that compare to other towns? Because I frequently hear people say that, not from New England, so it's not as important to me, but I always notice people in New England will say, well, what's your mill rate? You know, and they seem to like comparing them. So that I thought that might be something we could potentially look at. Aside from that, the last thing we did was we're short a member. And we'd like to make a recommendation to the committee. Ralph attends all our meetings, so this was very, very helpful.
There's an agenda item under new business for that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I'll wait till then. I apologize.
Good.
Thank you.
Yes, I forgot that was there. Okay, so I want to, before I forget it, I want to address one thing you mentioned there. In reference to the numbers, Phil, the postcard has some sort of an updated version of that, right? That helps in, there it goes, right there. Okay. So if you, can you zoom it a little bit?
Yeah.
You're doing that right now. Okay. Nice.
Sorry, I interrupted you guys. Catherine's got her hand up too, Mike.
Okay, so this, as Phil gets this up here, it's what he would like, and I've looked at it also. I think it's a reasonable thing for us to put on the postcard that we should try to get out tomorrow, because on the other side, you'll see on the other side of it has the information about the 26th. So see on the right, community forum, the 26th. Basically, some of the same things we had, the QR codes, and then it has the 4 boxes. Which show not exactly what you talked about, Peter, but it does show that the 100, the 130, and the 160. And we just used round numbers instead of the 135, we used 100, 130, 160 because the math is a little cleaner at those numbers. So this may help answer some of the concerns you guys talked about. So I don't know if you want to look at that while I get Catherine's question. Catherine?
Yes, so I actually had a different question, but since you have this up, I wanted to ask, because I think it came up in one of the informational sessions. This proposed or anticipated tax increase based on where your property falls within those three ranges. Is this just for the new school? Because I know, like, Phil, you had mentioned that there's a governmental yearly increase that is also going to be impacted, but that's not part of this number, correct?
Yes, it is.
It is. Okay, so if we were to carve out the tax increase just as a result of the school, what would that look like?
So can you see the spreadsheet on your screen, Catherine?
Yes.
So and what Peter was talking about before was the assumptions. And so the assumptions here is that to figure out what your taxes are, you have to understand what the grand list is, and you have to understand the collection rate. So we're basically saying, just so, because zero is not realistic for governmental growth over the next 5 years each year. So we just put in a number to show, hey, there is going to be some growth. It may be higher, it may be lower. We put in the 2.5%. So that 2.5% is balanced in the total net to be raised there. That's in that number, along with the cost of the note or the bond. So it's got the total governmental budget along with the cost of the school. And it assumes a 99% payment rate, which is what we always do. And assumes a 2.5% increase, which is just a placeholder to show that there is some sort of growth. And basically what happens is for each of these, and you could remove the name. This is what I said in their finance meeting, is that on this postcard, realistically, you could just say, remove the name here, new school. And you could just say, hey, if you had a $60 million project and the bond was 28 million, this is what your approximate taxes would be. And there's an explanation up here. And I shared this just as a general draft in the town office building here with some new folks, just to say, do you understand what your mill rate is? And obviously, depending on which office you go to, some people fully understand mill rate and others don't. And so it was clear to take off the mill rate because I don't know that people really get that. What we were trying to do is to say, hey, if you want to find your own property, here's the website to go to, find the value of your assessed property, and then you can compare it to what's on this screen, to what the 100 to 130 or 160. And if, like I said, very few were in that 200,000 plus, and so that's why I kind of said maybe 156 was the average before removing those $600,000 plus folks. So we would at least cover up to 160.
Okay, so if I'm reading this right, for the year 2023, 2024, and I had a property of 130, it would increase by 135. And then the following year, is that in addition to the 135 increase is going to be another 212?
Correct.
Is
So
it just
that's the bold there. And then that bold that says taxpayers can see the estimated annual tax increase below. So, and this is what I think Peter's trying to get at, and I'm not sure the best way to do it. Because you could show a tax increase over 6 years, but it's not equal each year.
right?
You can see there's a big jump the year of the bond. And
Exactly.
so that's why we tried to put this as annual tax increase. So the first year it increases $135. The second year it increases $212. The third year, $322. It just moves forward from there. And you could figure out that if your taxes are $4,000 this year, your taxes over those 6 years probably would increase approximately $2,000 on this option.
Okay, so it is like a cumulative increase. So if we were to draw a line in the sand and my taxes are 4,000, the first year it's gonna be 4,135. The following year is gonna be 4,135 plus 212. So
Correct.
at the end of the day, with this option, it'll be a cumulative increase of all these numbers.
Right.
I gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. My original question was actually to comment on what Ralph was sharing with us. I think those questions deserve to be answered from the perspective of, people looking for some confirmation about, the dollars and the spending. And so it may be a combination of the finance subcommittee and the communications subcommittee sort of getting together to respond to those questions that Ralph had. And I would like to see them in our updated Q&A. I don't know if Ralph has shared those with the chairperson yet, but I'm curious as to what the answers are. And I think it'd be helpful to have them in our updated or FAQ document.
I already wrote that down.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Did you want to
Mike?
respond to that before I go, Ralph?
Go ahead.
Okay, Ralph.
One suggestion that I would have for this postcard is the column titles. I know it's stated up above, but it's, people's eyes don't go to the small text at the top. They go right to the table. And the column titles should be annual tax increase.
Okay, Phil's making that note right now.
Because it's misleading, it can be misleading depending on how people look at it. And we need to make every effort to get them to realize that this is a cumulative effect. And this does not include any impact from any other town budgetary issues.
It does, it's a 2.5% increase.
That's it.
It does.
Right.
If you bought milk and gas lately, you know it's not 2.5%.
My budgets are on that.
Exactly.
That's something.
That 2.5%. Phil, can you go back to that table? Or your spreadsheet? Can you change the 2.5% and see the change in the numbers down below?
I don't think there's a formula there.
Well, the 2.5% isn't a formula, but how about down below?
Has to be in the formula change.
It'd have to be in the formula to change to 2.5%. So.
Just
there's
highlight.
It's not, there's no formula to change the budget impact. It's just not formulated, Ralph.
He'd have to manually redo all the numbers.
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right. That's too bad. It would be better. It would be better if it would recalculate for us.
Well, I mean, can I ask a question? So you said you were talking about increasing the, no, I'm not good at asking a question.
Go, yes.
You're talking about increasing the percentage of annual operating budget. But, how many different assumptions do we give? Should we assume that maybe the grand list will change because in some of that time frame there'll be a rebound? We have to stick with a set of parameters that we're using. These are all assumed numbers. And I think that's probably the most important thing we can convey to people, that we could change any one of the numbers and they could change in any direction.
Well, can I respond?
Yeah.
Thank you. In a high inflation environment that we're in, no one's gonna think we're credible suggesting that we're gonna have a 2.5% increase in spending. That just seems ridiculous to me.
Well, but over the long term, it might be reasonable. Maybe not in these couple of years.
Well, I'm suggesting that we at least reflect reality in years 1 and 2, and then try and project something. All the projections I've seen is showing something in the 3%, 3.5% range. If good things happen with the Fed, so on and so forth. But to say right now that we're gonna have a 2.5% increase, it doesn't seem likely to me when we can't buy trucks for what we thought we were gonna buy them for. So that's just my own simple economic thinking. There was something I forgot that Justin and I discussed in our meeting that, and I think, Mike, I tried requesting this of you. This spreadsheet that Phil just had up there. I think it would be helpful, not just to have the first 6 years. Now, Phil already responded, I sense he's already rustling over there. But
Are you a pile of leaves?
to have the full 20 years, so we can say to taxpayers, this is the cost of, I realize the bulk of the costs of the first 6 years. I understand that. I told one person, they said, Pete, you're crazy. Who cares about 20 years? I think it's important for us to show it. And I would like our town financial manager, at the great personal risk potentially, to do that work, run this out to the full 20 years, so we can see it. There's gonna be some, just like the library, we're still paying for something on the library every year, right? I'd like to see that done out. And it would be helpful for us to have that from her.
So I do understand your request, and it's in the stack of the million other things to get through.
Thank you.
And trying to prioritize which things we needed like for tonight.
Right.
And getting you to your meeting so you could put together your stuff earlier today. I think there's still an opportunity. We might get to something on that line for sure.
Can I speak to the, I'm just not sure it's realistic. 2 weeks ago, the finance subcommittee was given the information. I think you could take the numbers and the formula Phil
I
gave
got
you.
that from Phil. I
Just
just,
hang on, let her finish,
Right.
let her finish.
That I think Phil had said, you have the whole spreadsheet, you could plug it in and you could go out 20 years, correct me if I'm wrong. But for 2 weeks, you had the information.
exactly, and I couldn't figure it out. It was like a data dump that was enormous. I mean, I couldn't even read the font. There were all these different colors, and it was very confusing.
I guess I'm a little frustrated that in 2 weeks, we're now talking about how someone else can go back. We told townspeople we would have this information. And we're sitting here, we don't have it to look at, and we aren't providing it to them. That's concerning to me that the finance subcommittee waited until their meeting an hour before this meeting to say they don't have everything they need to give us some responses. I'm a little frustrated with that.
So one point of clarification, Pete did email me that question a few days ago. So it wasn't just today, it was a few days ago, but the only thing we can do right now is see what we can pull together and what's reasonable to pull together. I think, the cart and the horse are not necessarily together right now. The only thing we can do is try to get them back together and, prioritize what we can get done over the time in between.
I'm just not sure. It's important information. Do not get me wrong. But our finance office is overwhelmed with work. It is budget season, and this is not a priority right now. The priority in that office is working on our budgets. And so she's in the middle of that at the same time as audit reporting. And are we planning to, you want this before next Wednesday? I would assume.
Okay.
This is information we should have out to the public before we go to that public
Point of
forum.
order. Stop, Erica. Well, Mike, I'm withdrawing my request. I will do the best I can. I thought when Phil said he sent it to me, I was getting this format for the remaining 14 years. I didn't realize I was gonna get the bond finance group's entire package for how they're managing the bonds. It's more than I anticipated or understood, but I will attempt to do so.
So why don't we do this for the good of the order? Why don't you take another look at it, and why don't you communicate with me where you think you are, and let's see if we can come up with a solution to expedite an answer that we can share with the public, all right? Let's see if we can come up with something.
I'm gonna use the same format. I think it's a good one. I would not hand what I got to anyone.
I feel like Phil is offering maybe a partial solution here.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I'm dangerous enough that I can do one, and I can get it right. Like I've learned enough from Don that I can get with the formulas in there, and looking at the bond sheet, I can get it. I don't have time to do for all of them. If you just want to see one, just to see the example.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. I took a different approach than the postcard you're sending out. We have all the scenarios. I picked one. I picked the new school with the order, the 1A. Because to me, it was the logical choice. Justin and I talked about this. It appears to be a probable direction. It includes most of the cost that the taxpayer could anticipate in this situation. And I looked at that one. And I wasn't gonna do all of them. It doesn't make any sense to me.
So what you're saying is that if he just did 1A, that would fit along with what the drive you were going.
I think
for.
that would be helpful to people.
Yeah, I
think-
can do it, but I'll be honest, the only way I'm gonna do it, I'm not gonna change it 2.5% because it changes every
I
formula.
won't-
I'm not gonna do that.
I'll do the same thing.
But I can easily dump these in because I know where I pulled the numbers from the bonds. And it's just once the correct numbers in the correct lane, it's just moving things across and making sure the math is right.
Thank you.
So I can do it for one, and I can share that out.
Can you do 1A?
Yeah, I can do whichever one you want.
Let's do 1A.
Okay.
Let's just pick one, and we'll just have to be clear on all of these topics we're talking about. There's the potential for the grand list to change. There's the potential for the mill rate to change. There's the potential for inflation to affect it. There's the potential for various different projects or none. We're just gonna have to be blunt about the fact that we can't put numbers on every scenario. That we're providing examples and that people are gonna have to extrapolate a little bit from that.
Correct.
Not that we're trying to be insulting to people, we just can't come up with all the variables.
Right.
And you know, when we do reval coming up, that people are asking me that, they're saying, well, what happens in reval? You know, is this gonna go through the roof or is that gonna go through the roof? The fact of the matter is when you have reval, if one thing goes up, typically the other thing goes down.
Right.
All other things being equal. But what ends up happening is, what is the effect of the one up and the one down? Usually the effect is your tax bill is somewhat similar at the end, unless there's a certain type of property that really gains, you know, or really loses, it skews it, but we cannot plug all the variables. We can't know what those.
That's why we
answers are
just
gonna
try to have some simple assumptions that
Right.
are consistent with what the town
be.
typically does.
Does that help us go in the right direction for what you guys are looking for on the subcommittee?
Justin, I think so.
Okay. A negotiated settlement here on this one? Ralph?
Yeah, I just want to make two quick, simple points. At least I hope they're quick and simple. Number one, has anyone bought milk and eggs lately? So that reflects on that 2.5%. As far as reval, I think that's a greater paranoia than is reality, because the bottom line is the town has to spend X amount of dollars on government operations and education operations. So the tax bills going out aren't going to change significantly unless your property suddenly doubled in value. There's not going to be a significant change. So reval is nothing to be scared of. So the grand list goes up, the mill rate goes down. It's kind of how it works, unless you decide to spend a couple $1 million on roads. Then it's a different story. All right, I'll shut up.
That's outside of our scope. Yeah.
I know.
All right, so postcard is okay with Ralph's change? Is that?
I think with changing that to say annual tax increase, I think we should get, because I mean, time is of the essence on the
We're
postcard.
giving them some information about, and we can always explain more,
Right.
but at least we're giving some tax implication other than someone saying, dude, it's going up $50 a day or whatever someone wants to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other, go
I
ahead.
just make a comment about the postcards that the rest of you here. We had great turnaround last time, and so I hope we have the
If we
same.
don't, yeah.
If we don't, maybe Phil can communicate to the committee why it may not go out, because if we were trying to send it out specifically with that January 26th date on it, there may have to be an adjustment. So if they can't turn it around as quickly as they did, you know, what we don't want to do is think it's going to be in mailboxes on Wednesday, but we don't pick it up until Tuesday, and it may or may not happen from the post office. So this is definitely a tight timeframe, which they were able to do last time.
We're trying to make it work.
Yeah, so
Right.
we're gonna beg and plead.
Thanks. Thank you for the work on that. All right, anything else on finance,
Now let's move on.
gentlemen?
We're good.
All right. Moving on from finance to old business owners, project manager Collier's update. Scott, I've allocated you 1.7 minutes.
I think I can beat that. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'll be brief. As you know, I've been supporting the architect in the development of the concept plans with the estimating and some of the spreadsheets that you saw on Rusty's sheet this evening. I was going to give an update Mike already talked about, and I have reached back out to Eagle for an update on the environmental, so I'm staying on top of that. I have requested that Rusty get me a proposal. I don't anticipate it being more than a few $1,000s, but for the engineer that is now familiar with both sites, once a option is selected, there is a filing, a form, the EDO 53 for approval of the site when you go to the state. So I've asked him for a little bit of assistance, get us a proposal on that. Hopefully I'll have that for the next meeting. I have updated the milestone schedule, but I'm waiting on that because I'm anticipating under the next, one of the next topics that Eric is going to be talking maybe a little bit more about the referendum timeline. I have inserted that into our timeline, but understood that it wasn't necessarily firm enough to formally issue. And then just while I have everybody, just so I don't have to break in at the end, I will be gone next week from the 25th to the 1st. My plane lands at about 6:20. So if the meeting is similar to this evening, I'll certainly try and dial in on the way home and be there to answer any questions. But I think at this point, hopefully, Mike and committee members, you have information from Colliers that we've provided that's clear in an effort for you guys to make a decision, on the 1st. But certainly, Mike, if there's anything you need, just email me and I'll get that information to you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that.
Mike, I have a question for Scott, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I had asked this question of QA&M with respect to the auditorium. Does your numbers include a high school style auditorium, sloping
Yes.
floor, theaters, seating, et cetera?
Yes, I discussed that with Rusty, and yes, it is, we'll say a performance type theater where it would be appropriate for plays, lighting systems, sound systems. It's not just, a stage
flat
like you
floor.
have in a gym. It's
Okay.
an appropriate auditorium, yes.
Okay, good enough. One thing I did notice on the recap, fixtures and furnishings didn't change from a 1 to 1A or 2 to 2A.
It
So
wouldn't. You've got the same amount of kids, and the way we do it is we do it at a value per student body to outfit, to provide the desks, chairs, your teacher, your staff level isn't changing. So
I'm thinking about
furniture and equipment remains has been the same number used for all. And those are based on what we're seeing right now per pupil for technology and furniture to outfit similar buildings.
Understood. But my concern is about the auditorium. Are there any furnitures and what have you going into the auditorium that wouldn't be in a non-editorial auditorium option?
No, it's all fixed seating. It's all hard construction. There is no loose materials typically.
Okay, that's fine. That's all I had. Thank you.
Other questions for Scott on his update, Justin?
That form that you were talking about filling out, that you asked for the quote for QA&M, that's for either site, correct? The new site or the existing home?
Yeah, it's part of the grant application. It's the EDO 53, and you just have to download some specific site plans and things that are typically available to civil engineers. And it also requires either an engineer's signature on the document or could be the town engineer planner. But OSCGNR typically likes to see an engineer's signature. So I've reached out for that, for a proposal for that support. Excuse me.
Anything else for Catherine?
Just a question on that, Scott. Is that part of your fee?
No, we didn't have engineering fees or that type of support within our fee. And again, we're hourly, and I think Peter can attest to the fact that I've been trying to really do my best to stretch your dollars as far as they can go. So I certainly think we're trying to be very prudent in I'm a taxpayer too, so I know. So we're trying to stretch your dollar as far as it goes, and I do think there's considerable amount of money remaining for Collier support, which may not get used.
Okay,
And
I
I
just,
believe-
I only asked because I thought that was part of the whole grant application type thing, so.
Yeah, we're absolutely gonna help you with the grant application, getting those estimates and those things ready. But downloading it, and I'm not an engineer, so I can't sign the form.
Okay, thank you.
And Scott, if I remember right, what you were saying, you thought the value in using Rusty was that they already have work into some of that. And so it would mean not paying to duplicate the work they did.
Right, most of it again is downloading very specific plans, wetland information, environmental information, other documents, and then putting the information together and sign it, having an engineer sign it. So yeah, I think there's value to it, and again, I don't anticipate it being a sizable sum.
Mike, if
Yeah.
I may, just a follow-up question on that. I'm assuming we're gonna do the EDO 53 after a selection has been made, correct?
Yes, correct. After a
Thank you.
project selection has been made, and again, you just need it for the grant application.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Scott's report? No, thank you, Scott. All right. Next, on to new business. Recommended date for referendum. Erica, you want to talk about the referendum schedule?
Sure. So at our last meeting, I outlined the process. We talked about that at length. So the rough schedule would be on Wednesday, February 1st, this committee making their decision and then sending a recommendation communication to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen would meet at their regular meeting and then refer the appropriation and borrowing authorization to the Board of Finance and refer the project to PZC for an 8-24 approval. And then our timeline, I've included some PZC dates, so they would have an opportunity to take potential action. And then I'm suggesting a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, where the SBC would present their project to both boards. The Board of Finance would then recommend appropriation and bond and note authorization. The Board of Selectmen would receive the Board of Finance recommendation and set a town meeting. We move to have the item approved at referendum, select a referendum date, approve the bond forms of bond resolution, and then officially warn a town meeting and referendum. All of these items are very specific to the process, both bonding and an OSCGR application, so they would be requirements. Our bond counsel is planning to speak before Board of Finance tomorrow night to help them understand their role in the process. And they actually deliver a package to us, which would be all of the resolutions based on the project that was chosen and the appropriate legal wording. From there, we would legally warn both the town meeting and the referendum. It would be in one warning. So this is where I followed our typical process, and we do one after the other. In a selectman initiated referendum, they would be warned at the same time. Then 2 weeks after that meeting of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, there would be a town meeting where the resolution would be read and discussed. The ballot question would be announced. There would be discussion of the public, and the meeting would adjourn to referendum, which would be held between 7 and 14 days after the town meeting. So based on the timeline from February 1st, I would recommend a March 21st referendum, or at the latest a March 28th referendum. Typically, we would need 2 weeks in between there because there would be an additional warning need to be made between town meeting and referendum that doesn't exist in the selectmen initiated referendum. So the warning actually happens when the town meeting is called. So, and once that town meeting is called, that's when the blackout period exists in order to expend town funds, and explanatory text can go out. It is It comes from the town clerk's office, and it has to be vetted by a town attorney. That is statutorily required.
Which basically means in plain English, that the only information going out from the town is here is the topic to vote on, and here is how you vote on it.
Well, now here's how you vote. That's definitely what we don't say. Here's the
No,
information.
here's how you accomplish
Yeah.
the vote.
Yes.
All right,
Blackout period
Yes.
specifically. is to
not
avoid-
which choice to pick.
That's
No, that was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
There can be no campaigning for a particular choice. It is,
With town funds.
right, with town funds, right? It is, here is the date, here is the method
That is correct.
for you to deliver your vote.
Yes. So because that blackout period starts when you do the town meeting, that's, and again, normally we would go 14 days after the town meeting, 2 weeks. We only need 7 days. So, from this estimated timeline, we could go to March 21st. For a potential recommendation for that, referendum. So that would be my recommendation. And again, I worked with both, bond counsel and our attorney, on this project.
So do you see any need for action tonight, or this action would come potentially at the next meeting when we potentially are gonna select an option?
So so the referendum date is going to be set by the Board of Selectmen ultimately. I think the SBC should have some input on that. The sooner we get the date set and we agree, that gave us the extra month we had been talking about. And then we can set very specific dates with the Board of Finance on a joint meeting. The others are regular meetings that I have mapped out.
Well, I would think it'd be prudent, just in my initial reaction, to take the later of the referendum dates, and the reason being, despite the fact that this doesn't seem like winter,
It is winter.
there is, just in case one of these meetings has to get emergency bumped because of terrible weather,
Mhm.
we're better off being a week further out.
And because we are very specific with our terminology, I'm gonna say none of these meetings would qualify for an emergency meeting. So we would have to, a special meeting, and they'd have to give that 24 hours notice where an emergency meeting. you don't
Right,
need it.
right.
So I just want to be clear when we say emergency about weather, that we wouldn't be having an emergency meeting. So the 28th we can do, we can stick with the time frame and adjust potentially that Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting. That's probably the trickiest, simply because there are a multitude of meetings in this time period.
Yeah, I think you schedule the early stuff as early as possible in case you have to move something for an
Right.
emergency,
Yeah.
and you schedule the bookend at the far end as
Yeah.
far out as is reasonable, so you have time to move in between.
Yeah, there are so many moving meetings in here, so we can do that, and go with the 28th, and then I can get those dates. Scott, I've shared with Scott the preliminary draft of this. There's some adjustments to my schedule simply because of the warning period, Scott, so, we'll finalize it and get it out to you.
Any other, I mean, I don't see, this is, like, I don't think this is an action item, right, that we make a motion on. We're just, because we are not actually setting the date.
Right, but from my perspective, Mike, this committee talked about when we had
You're looking for
anticipated.
guidance.
Right, we had anticipated, and we had said beginning of March, then we all kind of talked about, let's pump the brakes a little bit and
Right.
give us an opportunity to talk. And so this gives us that opportunity, that almost month between February 1st and the Board of Selectmen calling that meeting, to be able to have conversation with the public on the one project that this committee is gonna put forward to a referendum. And this.
Okay, so seeing that, then I don't want to just be my ramblings that indicate a consensus. So what are the board members' thoughts about the referendum date? Oh, sorry.
I think if we can decide this tonight and agree on it, it'd be nice to be able to say this next week.
Mhm.
It'd be nice to be able to say to the public, once a project is chosen on February 1st, here's the next timeline, and you could put the timeline on a slide.
The only,
And give the
the
information.
wording would be critical, though. It would have to be that we have recommended that date, because we don't call the date.
Correct.
Correct, but we could, at least you're saying we're recommending the 28th. And you could say why to give during this period of time. That's my 2 cents. I think I agree with you. I just think it'd be nice to say.
Thoughts from committee members? Do Do we want to make it a motion to recommend the date so that we've documented it as a motion? Or is it consensus good enough?
Quite honestly, I think consensus is probably good enough. I think the majority of this stuff is beyond our pay grades as far as the legal requirements. So I can acquiesce to this.
Okay, are we comfortable with the 28th being the later date, so there's a little bit of wiggle room in there?
I certainly can agree with you on that concept. Yes, we could get some snow this year.
I was just gonna say, but nobody used the S word, wow.
I saw three nods, 3 yeses.
Gary, oh, that's a thumbs up, not a raised hand, I got you, okay.
And
Chris did,
Chris,
I didn't
okay.
see Brianna, she's the only person for consensus, there you go.
All right, I think that we have the consensus that we're suggesting the 28th.
And in this, just so you know, this whole timeline was built on the discussion that happened here.
Yeah.
And
Right.
using.
Well,
that
and it's
time.
another week that we might be able to communicate something with the public. too.
Correct. Right, I didn't pick the date out of a hat, so.
Okay, next item of new business, potential planning and zoning commission, 824 review. I just put this on here because I wanted us to not miss a timeline. As I said in the email information that I did email all of you about this, right? The 824 review. I hope I did. A few days ago, I had it in my head that I emailed you all about this. Anyway, so.
I think you did. Gary responded to it, so I think it went to everybody, Mike.
Right, Gary responded to it, that's right. So it had Ralph's guidance, document on it from when he was planning and zoning. Okay, all right, good, I'm glad it wasn't just in my head. So basically, to sort of encapsulate it in a short thing, there's a provision in the Connecticut General Statutes 8-24. Which says basically in short, says that municipal improvements of certain types have to be reviewed for a report from planning and zoning. So I want to make sure we have that on our radar and that we know it's coming. And I don't believe we're in a critical spot on that process yet, timeline, right?
It's in the timeline.
Right, I mean, it's in your right, so we're not in a critical spot tonight, is what I'm saying.
No.
I just want it on people's radar, so if they need to be thinking about it or whatever. Ralph, as a planning and zoning expert, do you care to share a couple comments on that?
I don't know about expert, Mike.
Just a couple, please.
Okay, 2 things. Number one, we're going to need a report from an affirmative report from planning and zoning with respect to town acquisition of property or expansion of an existing town facility. If we do not get that from planning and zoning, it can be overridden by a town meeting. So hopefully we won't have to go there. But I think, whatever option we ultimately go with has to go before them. So even if we were just expanding Hall, it's a major change to the footprint. Planning and zoning is going to have to do an 824 review. Scott can chime in as to whether or not that has to be done before the referendum. I don't see why it would be because, well, I'm not sure. Scott, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, typically we do, because if it did not conform to the long-term plans of the community, it would be inappropriate to have a referendum on that and have it not be supported in the overall plan from zoning and for the community. So yeah, and in the timeline that Erica had put together and what I had originally identified based on recommendations from the Board of Selectmen, either the first or second potentially meeting in February. And again, there's not a lot to this. It's really just, it's not approving a project. It's really just saying that it makes sense with the overall plan of development of the community.
Correct. So that would leave what, the 7th to the 21st?
Correct.
Planning and zoning meetings.
Yes.
Mike, if I may?
Please.
In order for us to move this to referendum, Ralph, and then for the rest of the committee, it does have to have approvals from the 824 and the Board of Finance. Those all have to happen, so.
And that's from bond council?
That is from, and our attorney.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
without all of those approvals, so I've mapped out a plan, assuming there are approvals all the way. If those don't happen, there's,
There's a kink.
There's a kink, right?
You bet.
And that is why it's on the radar tonight. So we're aware of it. It's not a surprise after the February 1st meeting when we're talking about, let's do our 824, let's contact PZC for our 824 review. There is also the potential, if the townspeople select to move forward with the new project on the new property, there is the potential of planning and zoning action on that as well, because it is residential zoned and
Requires a special permit, yes.
there is, according to the zoning regulations, the school is allowed in residential with a special permit, right?
The challenge there, Mike, is that we shouldn't get into that special permit application until such time that we've got consultants on board to design the site and the building.
Of course, yep, I was just
Because-
noting it's on the radar, because it's in the public chitter chatter too, so it's important that people in the public, if they're hearing it, they know that we've talked about it.
Right, it's not a zone change. And just, I think you said it, and I want to make sure I heard everyone, I want to make sure everyone understands what I know in my 20-page emails with our attorneys, is that the 824 review comes from the Board of Selectmen. So you don't have to refer it, it comes
The
from.
request
Yeah.
for the review.
Yes, it goes to and from the Board of
Yeah.
Selectmen.
Okay.
And so part of my plan has already is putting on the radar of these commissions. That there, will be some items. Again, assuming a decision made on February 1st.
Anything else on the planning and zoning?
Yes. He has it already.
Okay, next on the list. Finance subcommittee opening. You were starting to opine on that before?
I did. Justin and I have had guest appearances by Ralph at all of our finance subcommittee meetings, so we thought we would potentially add him to the committee if the entire committee felt that was appropriate.
So you've been hanging out in the window of the clubhouse, Ralph? And you'd like some of the.
Yeah, I have this bad habit of attending meetings.
He promised not to share any planning and zoning information with us.
You could have too.
Sometimes it's safer to be at a meeting rather than absent, because when you're not there, you can get appointed to things. This is kind of the reverse, I guess, but I know
Yeah.
I'm willing to step in and work with the finance committee. Subcommittee.
Okay, do we have other people interested in being on the finance subcommittee?
Oh, please speak up, somebody.
Okay, I will nominate. Do we have to do like a whole nomination and everything for this, or is it, these are just, it's a subcommittee, right?
Nobody else is, the rest of them are not
Typically, we just agree.
banging on the Zoom.
Do we have consensus that Ralph can go in the clubhouse on the finance subcommittee? It looks like we have consensus. Okay,
Thank you all.
all right. Congratulations, Ralph.
Oh, gee, thanks.
All right, item 9, future business, item for future agendas. I think we have a pretty good path of things we already know that are going on it. Erica?
If we could specifically talk about the February 1st meeting and what that will look like. So this
Yeah.
is a lengthy agenda. That's an agenda where you all will be asked to take all the information that you've been given and actually make a choice. Phil and I won't be partaking in that as we're non-voting members. So I would suggest maybe a brief update from our OPM and really be able to dive into the survey results, the public forum results, and make the bulk of that meeting be that very important discussion, take the financial information that hopefully you'll have then to piece that together. That's my recommendation, is that we don't overload the meeting, that you can have real good conversation on how to get from 4 options to 1. Potentially.
Again, I may not be available until later in the meeting. I'll be in a plane that's landing around 6 to 6:30.
Well, these usually get over with really quickly.
Pardon?
These usually get over with very quickly, so.
Yeah, I'll do my best to dial in as soon as I get back to my car.
Okay, so let's go.
I mean, I could see a solid 2 hour discussion. I think there was some concern about not getting the survey results because we kept it open so long. And really be able to dive into what that data means based on the number of results. So I would encourage a lighter,
Simple agenda.
a lighter. item
Focused,
agenda,
a
but
focused
full,
agenda,
yeah.
a focused agenda. It's not necessarily light. it's
I
just
don't think we need committee reports.
No.
I think we need to get
I
into
think-
the data. I think that's.
I think
that's
you
the
might
point.
want a finance committee.
But I don't know that it should be part of the data presentation and it's not necessarily their committee report. It's the
Input from the committee.
the presentation for decision is, January 26th.
Yeah.
The survey,
Just narrow focus on.
impact, tax
decision.
impact, and
Anybody else with items for the agenda, for the next meeting?
I don't know if it's for the agenda, but we're down a board of finance member also.
I think that's on the Board of Finance's agenda for tomorrow night about, a membership and potentially a new appointee to send a rep to send to this. Is that on the agenda for tomorrow night?
Yes,
We
it
have
is,
a
Mike.
We have a nod from a Board of Finance member, as well as Ralph, who is also hangs out at their clubhouse too.
And if I can note, unlike, the member specific information in the, and from the Board of Selectmen was that it be a Board of Finance member. As opposed to Board of Finance, member or designee, that it was specifically a member of that commission, just to keep that, in mind for folks.
actually.
Like the
Okay.
first selectman didn't necessarily, you just happen to be,
right.
in my opinion, the ideal choice coming off that committee. But the first selectman designee could have been anyone,
Right.
not necessarily a selectman. But I
Yes.
thought it was really, we thought at the time it was really important for an actual member of the board to participate.
Understood. Yeah. Okay, notes, thank you, Justin, on that. Anything else, for future agenda items? Okay, we are back to present to speak. I'll start in the room again, out of respect for the people who are sitting here all evening on those really comfortable chairs. Ma'am, would you state your name and address, please?
Steph Summers, 4 Y Road. I just want to thank you guys for everything that you're doing. It's intensive. And along those lines, I want to comment on something that I keep hearing present to speak before your group and other groups, like the Board of Selectmen. And also have seen comments online on social media. That's very troubling to me. And that is to presume controversy and conspiracy over the land for a new school build. I think that's unsubstantiated entirely. I'm putting it in the context also of you guys grappling with what the public should be talking about or saying, or, opinion versus fact. And it's very troubling to me for people to be going on the attack with presumptions that are totally unsubstantiated about backroom deals or cigar smoking or whatever. Some of the people who have commented on this have been in the public, in offices and know better, and especially in a town like ours. And it's troubling to me on a couple of fronts. One being that when people are volunteering to work for the town, or officers in the town of some kind, they're putting in more energy and time and of themselves than just sort of the snipers are. And it undermines the ability of people to come forward and volunteer their time and their willingness to really work for Willington. And I think it's eroding that kind of base of people that we can draw on as a town, and I find it very distressing. So I just want to mention that because I see you guys as being people who are working hard and giving a lot of yourselves, and that it's troubling to me that persists, especially in talking about the schools. I think it's a diversionary tactic. So I just want to mention that it's a personal view entirely. And the other thing I would say is because I've been to a lot of the presentations in Hall School, and this is pertinent to your planning for the 26th. On the warehouse hearings, it was 3 nights of 3-hour hearings, and they were, and one of the first one, which was at a Hall School, or that I went to a Hall School, they had the lectern sort of for the speakers, the present to speak, sort of at a tilt, and you could hear them both from the bleachers and from the front, I think. So that really helped the audio and the connectedness of the people observing it to the speakers, to the, and the other comment is, I think the problem is that you guys need to have a screen or a visual, which is really hard to read from the bleachers anyway, but the tables up there, like it was for the PCC and like it was for the first school presentation. And that distance is really hard for the audio, I think. And so I do applaud you guys trying to figure out a way to close the gap and improve the sound for the people who are observing or who are online. I know it's like a crazy thing to have to do the hybrid approach, but I do applaud you thinking about that audio and the vision of the speaker themselves. It's almost easier to see a speaker on the screen than it is in the room, which is unfortunate. So I think the distance from the group listening is, I think Catherine said, move the table up. If there's any way you can do that, I think that's good for a lot of reasons. But so that's mainly everything. And then I was wondering, are the figures that we were talking about tonight about the tax impact, are those available already on the school website or somewhere where people can see those?
Came up in our meeting.
No, not yet, but it will be like.
We're not supposed to engage in
Oh,
present to speak.
sorry. Never mind. I just think it would be good if especially with the closeness of the postcard getting to every door direct. It would be cool if there was some way for the public to see those.
Thank you for your comments. Let's go to online. Is there anyone present to speak online?
Is Mr. Teller?
Nick, Tella, we lost you in.
Yeah, Nick Teller, 49 Myrtle. My daughter's unplugged my internet, so you were lucky not to hear me in the beginning. So just to follow up on some comments that were just made there, I mean, I've been reaching out to the state in regards to what's going on with that property. I've talked to 2 different agencies. While they can't formally get involved, they definitely have said if this was going on within their agencies, they would throw up red flags and investigate it more, as though it seems to be shady. So that's coming from 2 different agencies at the state level. So I was looking at some things that were presented earlier in the meeting. So they had like a 3A, which is basically option 2 and just some other format. So I saw the square footage at increased numbers. Is there going to be a release of those updated costs of 28.9 going up to whatever it may be and so on? And then in regards to, I believe it's January 26th meeting, I believe if I got the date wrong, I apologize, but the open meeting, I think that should be as open of a dialogue as possible, ask a question, and then allow for a follow-up. I think that would be the best way to approach there. Peter's comments about, they hold weight about people being talked down to at times. I personally have been shut down at times in the meetings. While I do say that, this meeting, this SBC has been pretty good, even during the presentation that I went to at town hall there. You guys were great. So I do thank you for that great experience there. Mike had talked about how the planning and zoning meeting was conducted and how he won't let certain things fly. I personally feel, you got to be a little bit more open-minded. You guys talk in front of the public all the time. You're super comfortable doing it. People don't get up there. Sometimes they might go on a rambling joke to get their point across. But if that's what it takes to let them speak, I think you need to be open-minded to that because, again, you're used to this. Other people are not. Other comments, so what states that the SBC can't change it or modify its charge? And who could change that? You know, because there's a lot of studies that are unforeseen, well, as far as costs and such, and those need to be completed for the people. There's a list of 100 or more properties that was looked at. I believe Phil maybe narrowed it down to 13, if I'm correct. Can that list just be published on the SBC site? And then in regards to, you know, I heard grand list going up, maybe the mill rate going down. I mean, that's a dream, but that's not realistically going to happen. I think on that flyer, it should be noted, and maybe I just didn't see it because I'm online, but those, the home price increase are based on taxes in 2018, 18 assessed values. I think there should be some kind of notation to at least let people know that these numbers are being drawn off of the 2018 and do not reflect the potential increase that assessed values are going to go up. The operating expenses that, you know, I see being saved, I think it was 500,000 plus, 440,000 of that coming from staff. You know, I understand a principal is probably going to get released from either hall or center. What other staff will be released? You know, because we're still going to need the same teachers if we're bringing over the same amount of students and grades. I just don't understand how that 440,000 gets comes up with. And that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Yes, sir.
Alan Ayers, 38 Timber Lane. I likewise just wanted to come down here and tell you guys like how happy I am, what you guys have been doing. I didn't want to, you know, waste too much time, so I figured I would at least have to come down here and suffer and sit a little bit to do that. I really want to thank you guys. How I know a lot of you guys have been like online, answering the same questions over and over again. A lot of things aren't true. People are doing it. Like one thing on the mill rates, like if people really want to know what their own tax might go in, just go on the website, type your name in, see what your taxes, what you paid, you know. All you gotta do is multiply that by the mill rate, that tells you what your assessment is, and then you can, you know, it's pretty easy to just figure out your own if you really want to. And you know, like, if your assessment goes up, then obviously the total amount of money, you know, you still have to pay the same amount of money, so that's not gonna change. I do it, you know, I expect, you know, we're gonna pay money, you know, it's like a real thing. And, you know, I think a lot of people accept that, and I think a lot of people in town don't always, aren't the most vocal people. A lot of people that kind of accept that, and they really want something great for the kids, they want something great for the future. You know, we're wedged between, you know, Holland and Mansfield, two, you know, school systems, and we want to recruit teachers, and people want the best education, and that's part of it. And I'm really proud of you guys and what you guys have been doing. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. Back online. Jim Marshall.
Hey guys, couple of quick comments about the 26 presentation format having sat in too many of those PZC meetings. I had two things. I think the multiple, and you guys talked about it earlier, but for logistically, I think it's very important to have multiple mics on the dais, separate from the audience. It's the only way it functionally works well effectively. The other thing I caution against is avoiding the pitfall that I think part of the PZC conversation was just people talking at the PZC without any engagement. And by that, I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about getting a whole bunch of questions up front and then waiting to respond. It is a very staggered, it's a very unengaging format to a degree. So I think there does need to be some degree of flexibility and back and forth. And I'd encourage it, knowing that there's probably going to be a lot of interest in a very long night. So anyway, thanks for the work you do, guys. And that's it. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room for present to speak? Last call for online, present to speak. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. A second. They get a second there somewhere?
Second,
Okay.
that's all done.
All those in favor of adjournment, wave and say goodbye.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned at 9:30.